Well, hello. Welcome back, everyone. Been a little while since we've recorded. I think life has kind of got in the way for all of us. Sorry for having skipped a few races along the way, but we thought to make up for that, since we've got this mid-season break, we'd start and look at basically how the first half of the season has gone. And for this, I'm joined by Nedzo, Josh Revel, Ace Shield, and Motorsport Madness. Hello, guys. How are you doing?
Yeah, all good.
All good.
This is the
Yeah, great.
Cool. This is evolving into quite an interesting season. I think we've got some of the early teething issues are partially gone with this new battery system. They adjusted some things, and it's a bit less yo-yoing. The championship is unfolding in quite an interesting manner. Particularly, there's the downfall of George. Lewis is coming to the fore. Kimi seems to be as strong as ever. I think first of all, we should probably try and look briefly at the three races that we haven't done episodes on. The first one being Canada, which I'm not going to lie, I would say has probably been the best race of the season so far. It just had, that fight with Mercedes was fantastic, and there was a lot of just chaotic things going on because there was that uncertainty about rain at the start, and we had McLaren throwing it before the race had even begun, and 3 different formation laps. I think Nedzo, you'd agree that was a pretty entertaining race, wasn't it?
Yeah, I can't lie. I can't remember anything from that race other than the Mercedes blowing up into each other nearly a couple of times, Kimi going over the grass, and then George imploding. But yeah, I'd say that title fight, when George decides to turn up to races and not just sit 5 tenths off the back of Kimi, it's quite entertaining to watch it happen live. But at least on the evidence of the rest of the races, George does need to step it up in terms of performances. Canada, as I say, you say it was the greatest race of the season. I don't particularly remember it. That's probably because of my short-term memory than anything else.
Who's the next one? I don't remember.
Ace, you go.
Okay, I'll go. So instead, I didn't think the fight between Antonelli and Russell was that great. Simply because each one was messing things up. I mean, Russell went long at the hairpin a couple of times. Antonelli also couldn't keep the lead once he got it. And he took 8, 9 laps to get ahead, and then lost the lead after just 2 laps against Russell. Frankly, I think Russell lost a deserved win with the engine issue. Then for the rest, I thought it was another nice, unfortunate race by Norris, while instead Piastri made a mess of things. Norris had to make up the ground after the team started in on the Inters, and he did his part. Then the engine blew up. Piastri instead made a mess of things. So did not particularly impress at all Piastri that weekend. And then there was the fight Verstappen-Hamilton at the end, with Hamilton coming back, having the better car and the younger tires, if I remember correctly. I hoped Verstappen could keep second place, but alas, it didn't happen. And then everything else, I don't remember anything from the midfield. I think it was a weekend where Alpine was best of the rest with Gasly, and then it was Racing Bulls. Yeah, and it was the Audi started on Inter tires. I don't remember anything else. Yes, Perez got his suspension broken at some point. It was the race where the suspension broke halfway through the race. Yeah, I don't remember anything else.
Yeah, I have to admit, I don't really remember much, and the only things I did remember has already been pointed out. But at least with George's engine just blowing up, it gave a bit of excitement to something that was okay up until that point. I wouldn't really consider Cadillac, Canada, one of my favourite from the season. I think probably Hungary, but we'll get onto that later. But yeah, and Perez's suspension just randomly breaking apart was quite fun to watch. But then Cadillac, you give them a free pass because they're a brand new team. Yeah, Piastri, I think it was the hairpin where he made his little error. I can't remember who he crashed into. I think it was
Albon.
Williams, wasn't it? Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
But yeah, apart from that, I can't really remember much. It was so long ago. I did watch highlights package just before coming on. But even then, I can't really remember much else that's already been mentioned.
Well, I'm glad I'm not the only person around here that's got wretched short-term memory. On the point of the Cadillac with the suspension breaking itself apart randomly for Checo, at least it was a nice change from the regular sort of failures for Cadillac this year, which are the brakes.
Yeah.
Which don't seem to be able to last 10 laps into a stint. So, hey, variants in there in their retirements. The notable things in there that haven't already been brought up, that was the start of a bad decline for Charles Leclerc. And, he's always been capable of dropping stinkers, but that was very much the time where everything shifted in the Ferrari battle. That was a fundamental weekend where Lewis's own form had ramped up tremendously, and he was at the forefront battling the Mercs. Meanwhile, we're having a look 10, 15, 20 seconds down the road, and Charles just at sea with that car. So it was kind of jarring to see that, and it was sort of the beginning of, not the end, but a painful stretch for Charles. And that's where it all started off at. With the Alpine thing, someone mentioned Gasly, but wasn't that one of the weekends where Colapinto actually didn't bring shame upon himself? Or am I remembering that wrong?
He was sixth. Yeah, he was best of the rest. Yeah, it was. Yeah.
There we go. So that was good. But as always, when it comes to Franco Colapinto, it's just like, good result. More, please. I don't want this once every 4 or 5 races thing. That's a Lance Stroll, for God's sake. But with the Merc battle, yeah, I agree with everyone else. I'm not convinced it was particularly great. What it was for me, though, we all knew that this was one of George's best circuits. And so we were expecting him to sort of not so much streak away, but have more assertiveness on his position as the better Merc that weekend. But that was not the case in race trim, and that does a lot to a driver's psyche when that happens. So, but similar to Ferrari, it was that weekend where you can't help but think that had a lasting effect on one of the driver's psyche. Ace?
Yes, on this point, here in Italy, especially since Antonelli is being very followed by the media, whenever we got to a track with many fast corners, the tendency was to, before the race, the prediction was to say Russell is gonna do better on this track. That's because last year, Russell was better, way better, stronger than Antonelli on the fast corners. He could feel the limit better than Antonelli in those corners, and so Russell had the advantage. And this has not carried over, because predictions for Silverstone, predictions for Belgium, supposedly Russell should have been better than Antonelli since those tracks suit him better, but that has not been the case. Antonelli, frankly, has been faster on almost all the tracks this year, exceptions Australia, Austria, maybe marginally Canada.
Yeah. Melbourne, I think that was largely down to Kimi starting in second position and still being there when half the grid went past. The race pace was generally pretty good. And who knows, had, Kimi got away at the start. Austria, yeah, George had him on his ass that weekend. But I think, because it's well documented, George's driving style, about how he brakes earlier than others but carries more speed through the corner. And that definitely played more to his advantage with the previous cars that we had. But this new generation, it's acknowledged that it lends more toward drivers who like to raw dog the front end of the car, I think. So it's not even just, we're not even just talking about development of a driver who's in his sophomore year. Like, everyone's getting to grips with these cars, but also there's a difference in how you got to drive them. And it's not so much on rails anymore. There's a difference with how you got to plant the front end of the car. So, yeah, whatever the case, as you said, on the vast majority of tracks, Kimi has been the better driver at Merck, and I just didn't expect it, really. And I definitely didn't expect it in Montreal, because I think most of us thought that George would take the forefront, and it didn't quite pan out that way.
I mean, to me, Canada just kind of stands out because it feels like that's when the season properly got going, because we'd had the 5-week gap in April, and then we had 3 weeks before that was Miami. But also because it was like, this is where the gloves are off with Mercedes, because up until this point, everything had been very civil and nice, because of course that was a sprint weekend. And in the sprint race, Kimi was getting very flustered and angry because of people pushing him off or blocking him, and he didn't drive particularly well in it. And then, admittedly, a lot of it probably was manufactured by the battery deployment and everything, but it just there was several laps in a row that those two were going at it, and obviously that came to an end when George's car blew, which started this trend that now sort of makes me nervous whenever they're trying to pass anyone, that their engines like to overheat when they're stuck immediately behind someone else. And creates a lot of problems. But also because at the time I joked that it was kind of like a bit of a 1980s race, because we had all of that, but then we had people crashing into each other. We had a lot of random mechanical failures. We had I think Lance Stroll was lapped twice in the first 30 laps or something. And the changing conditions at the start, like having some people trying intermediates and then giving up on it. It had a mixture of basically everything kind of all thrown into one, which just kind of made it stand out a lot, I think. And that was when everything really, really got going. Then if we skip forward to more recently, because it's the last 2 races we haven't covered. So by Spa, well, for George, as we said, Canada was the beginning of that downfall, and then it just got even worse in Spa, getting taken out by Lewis. For Lewis, that's where his string of penalties, well, it had already begun in Silverstone, then just continued there with him being the one that took him out. I mean, now I think there's been 5 different races now where he's been involved in accidents at Les Combes or something. He seems to have a habit of that. And otherwise, yeah, but Kimi just drove pretty seamlessly. And again, they threatened rain, which never came. But as Belgian Grand Prix, I suppose, ace, it could have been worse, couldn't it?
Belgian Grand Prix. I'm trying to remember it right now, don't worry. So it was last race won by Antonelli, by overtaking Leclerc by the end, who got ahead thanks to a virtual safety car. Hamilton had the 5 seconds penalty because he was on the inside and tapped George at La Source. Is that the name of the corner?
Les Combes.
Les Combes, okay. At Les Combes, and Russell was out of the race. It was the race where Norris had the all-fault strategy, and so could have made an amazing recovery, but didn't. And it was Ajjar who they gambled on a strategy by pitting him on the first 2 laps, so that he could get away the second tire and just do the entire race on hard. And so that worked out wonderfully, because then he took advantage of the second virtual safety car. Piastri and McLaren were not as fast as everyone else. And in the midfield, it was the race where Bortoleto went 2 points again with Audi, yes. Okay. So it was also the weekend where Russell was having those massive troubles with the engine, but he was lamenting he was down on power at the last straight, yes. And here's the point with Russell. He can claim there are many problems with the car, with the engine, with the reliability, with the way the power is deployed. And yes, they're all there. but they're also there for Antonelli. The difference is, evidently, that Antonelli, being more at ease with these cars, when this issue comes up, he can make up for them. He can drive around them, he can face them. As soon as they come up with George, it's like George is walking a tightrope, and they unbalance him and he falls completely off the face of the grid, anything. And he can lament his misfortune as much as he wants, but Antonelli has not had that much less misfortune, and he simply has faced it in much better than Russell is able to. It's really a Russell problem, this. I think Belgium and Hungary were the definitive proof.
The only thing I can really remember from Spa is the brief moment that Verstappen gave us hope at the very start, where I think it was Antonelli that he overtook before Rouge and Rayon. And that brief hope was extinguished quite quickly along the Kemmel Straight. But to be honest, that's all I can remember from the Belgian Grand Prix. I think it was just for the rest of that, apart from the incident. For me, at least, it was just another. I think I fell asleep halfway through, so I don't think I've got nothing else to say about it.
What an invigorating podcast this is. Friends with memory problems, trying to remember these races. Yeah. Okay. I got an axe to grind here. The penalties dished out. So, with regards to Lewis, I know certain groups of people were saying that it wasn't warranted, it wasn't his fault, all that kind of stuff. Look, you got to draw a line in the sand. He smacked into him, forced him out of the race, by the book, that's a penalty. Unfortunate. And was it a racing incident? You can argue that, but we start giving leeway to stuff. It's opening a can of worms, Pandora's box, whatever have you. You can't really leave it up to interpretation. You have to play by the book, which is why when they didn't penalize Charles for what he did was completely asinine. Because what wasn't the argument that Oscar wasn't in a realistic opportunity to pass around the outside? How do you know that? Like, we see people pass around the outside often enough. Like, you can't start all of a sudden saying, like, if you don't have the inside line, you're basically going to get thrown to the wolves here. And they later admitted, we made a mistake. It's a bit late now, guys. You know, it's a bit late. One dude lost aero, and that pinged his whole race. The other guy, though, he kept on driving and fighting for the win. And I love Charles to death, but the fact that they didn't penalize that, and then they came out and said, we made a mistake. It's like, yeah, a mistake. Like you made in Monaco, where you pinged all those drivers, you ruined all those races, you absolutely butchered George Russell's race, and you allow Gasly to keep his podium by virtue of the fact he didn't serve his penalty, but the other ones did? Get out of here, guys. It's just one of a lot of times this year where you look at the officiating and you just think, you guys literally don't have a friggin' hope in hell with your officiating, if you want to call it that. I tried to find a superlative. I don't have one because it's been horrendous. And I don't want to get you guys demonetized, so I won't say what's in my head. Ace, help me out here.
That I think the incident between Hamilton and Russell and the one between Leclerc and Piastri are comparable enough in saying the FIA is not handling the stewards, the penalties correctly. But the mess at Monaco is something else. It's not the same thing. It's completely different.
Oh.
How many of you actually know what the problem was?
It's not that. It's not just the fact of whether or not that was strictly down to the pit lane penalty, or rather, hang on. Let me try and convert what I'm trying to say here into English. So we already knew what Gasly was penalized for. was the same thing a lot of people were penalized for. The problem is that they didn't Alpine argue that there was reasonable means of which there was
Okay, so let me
a fault going
explain
on?
also to the viewers exactly what the problem was at Monaco. Basically, the Monaco organizers, they planned the guardrails, the pit box, the curbs, everything. For that year, unaware to anybody, they managed to put the guardrail at the entry of the pit lane more inwards, not like the previous year. And so they made a bit more space at the entry of the pit lane. But FIA and those who are responsible of putting the speed sensors, the track sensor to sense when the car is passing, they were not aware of this change. And so they placed their sensor in the exact same place they had placed the previous year, 2025. And since the guardrails were no longer in the same place, also the sensors were no longer in the same place at the start of the pit lane. And but the FIA, not accounting for this change, kept the same distances as last year. And so effectively, there was a measuring problem with the speed in the pit lane, because the FIA thought the distance between sensor and next sensor was X meters. Well, actually, it was a bit less, more, it was different. And so the speed came out higher than it actually was when the car was passing in the pit lane. This problem was already evident in free practice, and so many teams actually reduced their top speed setting on the car in the pit lane. So if some teams didn't do that, they were taking a risk. And during the race, they had to give those penalties. And the entire issue of Monaco, the mess, is that some people were responsible for one thing, some people were responsible for another thing, and they can simply interact because the FIA is one thing, the track organizer a different thing, they don't communicate. How the heck do you fix this? Because this was the problem at Monaco. It wasn't the FIA being awful, unfair, or the penalties not being fair across the drivers. The problem is there was not communication between two different entities. This is a problem that you can solve once you find out it happens. It's such an unlikely problem that I think in the last 26 years, this was the first time it happened. So it's awfully unfair to just throw S on FIA and say they're incompetent when the issue is actually more complex, so complex. That Gasly kept his podium, that Russell had this race completely ruined, that Piastri had to serve a penalty, others did not serve. It's how the cookie crumbles, you know? It's just what happened.
Don't ruin my rage with and my melodrama with your logic. Very well put, and you are right. But now I look clueless again. But with regards to Belgium, my point still stands that woefully inconsistent. Other talking points from Belgium? What are there? I think I'm a bit like you guys.
Aston Martin was slower than HRT in 2012. That was a thing.
Were they borderline slow? Hang on. Wasn't top speed also slower than F3?
I think so, but in qualifying, Alonso's percentage and interval gaps to pole was bigger than De La Rosa's in 2012.
Oh,
so they were basically
didn't qualify.
Yes, they were basically slower than HRT for a brief point this season.
But
I mean, that was always going to be a circuit that was really cruel to them, at least Belgium. Yeah.
I will just say I had a couple of things to say because I heard someone mentioned that it was the 5th time that Lewis had an incident at Les Combes in his F1 career. Obviously, that was 2009 where he got caught up in the incident with Button, Alguersuari, and Grosjean, I believe. 2011, where he moved in the braking zone on Kobayashi and spun himself out.
He did what Charles did actually, pretty much in
Yeah.
2014, I can't remember if it was him on the inside clipping Rosberg's right rear or left rear.
No, Rosberg clipped him and he got the puncture.
Yeah.
Then 2022 with Alonso, and then 2026 with this one. Obviously, it was a penalty. I will say, people have been saying that Lewis recently has been on just a streak of penalties, but this is nothing new. I mean, this is a project that I'm slowly going through because I've got so many other ideas on the go. But I've been going through lots of old live text commentaries and other stuff to find out every single incident that Lewis has had in his career, not just with other drivers, but spins and mistakes in practice, like all that sort of stuff. And I think I'm at Germany 2008, and I've documented 85 instances of Lewis making mistakes, whether it be in practice, whether it be in qualifying, whether it be in the race, whatever. And people are saying like, oh, he's making loads of mistakes nowadays. Like, yes, he is. But the only reason people are pointing him out more than they used to is because people are more interested in Formula One, and that like people watch free practice, people watch these races and qualifyings more. Lewis has always been this error prone, and this is part of the reason why I don't think he's in the conversation for the greatest of all time. Because I mean, you could argue that guys like Schumacher, guys like guys from the past, at least from before 2000, have the look that you can't go back and watch free practice because it's all lost media at this point. But you just get the inkling that even guys like Verstappen, obviously, who nowadays have had their careers heavily scrutinized, Verstappen, since 2018, has very, very rarely made mistakes. Lewis is just all over the place at times, and that's what gets me for him. Like, again, he's had to, like, for example, Spain was a very good drive. There were a couple of other races where he's been very good, but as usual, as he has been since 2019, it's just up and down. It's just up and down. 2018 was a great season. 2019 was up and down. 2020 was up and down. 2021 was up and down. 2020, you could go through more. Apart from 2023, they were all just kind of. He had good moments, but that was it. But yeah, anyway, regardless, Belgium, Spa. Yeah, that's that. I don't really remember much of the actual race, because that's kind of what I do nowadays. But yeah, the main things are the only things I remembered from that race are from Lewis, and I'm not trying to just bash him, but that was the only things I could remember, and I want to contribute something.
A couple of points and things. So with Monaco and the pit lane, I think wasn't it the pit lane? It was the exit where the issue was, because basically because they had an 11th garage for Cadillac, they had to redesign the pit exit, and because there's a bit of a curve in it, is that some drivers were effectively cutting the last, crossing the white line and basically cutting the last corner, so they weren't technically going faster. In that, if you think it's distance over time, they were basically covering a shorter distance over the same amount of time, and that was what was making it technically faster, even though they weren't physically moving any faster.
Yeah. To be fair, what I've just thought of something that they could have instituted. I'm not sure if they do institute this, and I'm just being stupid, but something that NASCAR has when they talk about pit lane speeding, because they have their own pit lane speeding rules. They have the pit lane is divided into lots of segments, like 20 or so segments, and like if you can see exactly which segment someone is speeding in, you look at their average speed and you say they're speeding in segment 1 or segment 7 or whatever. And maybe if Formula One had introduced something like that, they could find out where the problem was and actually see, everyone is speeding at the one point where the thing is curved. Maybe we need to institute track limits, if you will, at a pit lane exit.
But like Monaco, they seem to act independently, because we know famously from 2021 they have their own camera people. So the coverage obviously was So they've always I think it's because it's an old circuit, because that used to be a thing like in the 50s and 60s when there were basically no rules on anything, and the regulations changed depending on the circuit and depending on who was the race director for that race and everything. And it sounds kind of like that a bit, just the lack of communication with the FIA on changes like that, because normally they have to approve everything and they do the track walks and blah blah blah. And with Spa, because the thing with Leclerc, because they didn't penalise it. I mean, like Stroll did a similar thing in European F3 in 2015 and got like a 3-race ban or something. But I mean, he did cause a massive accident in that case, rather than just lightly tapping somebody. But I saw as well that with George, because he qualified badly as well, is that what happened is because he was driving in the sort of old manner where he was braking later, that on the last two sectors, it meant he was running out of battery faster than Kimi was and losing time because he hadn't charged it up enough just by braking a bit later. So that's again one of these anomalies of the new battery system, is that where basically driving faster actually makes you slower. And I think there were even theories that apparently he lost so many positions going into Les Combes because he didn't shift down going through Raidillon, whereas everyone else did, and so he just lost the battery because of that, or something. Which maybe that's true, because I mean, I'm not necessarily convinced that his car is just broken or whatever. I think maybe he's just not really on top of battery deployment in the same way that Kimi is.
I think quickly before Ace jumps in, I was going to say maybe he doesn't have a gauge on how effective engine braking is, because I'm assuming what people were doing by shifting down and going down to, I'm assuming it was 7th gear up Eau Rouge, is it peaks the revs of the car and it will make it so that the acceleration is slower, and it will potentially even decelerate the car, and it will build up the battery. That's what these battery packs need. They need engine braking to be able to properly use or utilize the battery regeneration capabilities. I will just say, we just don't. These whole battery regulations these whole super clipping and stuff could have been fixed if the teams didn't complain about Audi's front regeneration braking systems that they used in LMP1 10 years ago. If they'd have just accepted that the technology is at best obsolete, and at worst they're going to get a tiny advantage, then we would have twice the regeneration capabilities, and therefore we wouldn't have super clipping.
Or we could have just avoided that problem by bringing back V10s. That's another option as well.
Or maybe the FIA could actually, the one time they needed to have more balls on them, just tell the teams, stop complaining. These are the rules. You'll take them and you'll race with them. If you want to leave the sport, go to IndyCar or something.
But wasn't there something in the 1980s, kind of like this with the gear shifting, where I think it was Senna had to keep the revs up constantly with the turbo cars to keep the turbo spinning? And that factored into gear shifts. People
argue that the reason why he used to blip the throttle, it was because of the turbos and because that would keep the car in the right power band. I don't think that was true. He always just did that, and that was just kind of his way of traction control, if you will.
I feel like if he did that all the time, he would have run out of fuel at probably every race as well. But
no, because what it is the difference, because not a normal driver goes smoothly up the power curve. He was just what he was doing was, because he was going like 20% throttle, 0, 30% throttle, 0, 40% throttle, 0, 50%. So in the end, it was probably saving if you look at the median throttle trace, it was probably about the same as the other drivers. He just got around it in a different way. The only way I could see it what's it called, taking up more fuel, is if somehow, like, because obviously when you start up something, like for example when you start up a Hoover, it takes more energy to start up the Hoover than it does to just keep it running. So maybe you could argue that putting the throttle on, starting it up makes it, but it didn't really affect him, and obviously until there were obviously issues where he did run out of fuel. I think Imola 85 was one of those times he ran out of fuel. I think, if I remember,
and basically right, everyone did in that race.
Exactly, but everyone did. So I don't think Senna really was detrimentally affected by the. As I say, when it got to the active cars, he was probably benefited by it, because those cars were designed to be driven aggressively by guys like Mansell, guys like Senna, and that's why Prost, to be honest, sucked in 1993. And the only reason he won that title was because Damon Hill is average at best.
With regards to the blipping of the throttle, I could be wrong here. This is just a theory, so don't quote me on this. Wasn't a lot of that down to trying to get the car to rotate for him?
I think so, yeah, because this is the case, and I've tried this because there are some racing games I play where that sort of style of acceleration is beneficial and it keeps the car rotating. Because if you, let's say, have a long parabolic, let's say Parabolica, for example. I was going to use the Watkins Glen boot because that's the carousel, sorry, Watkins Glen, because that's the corner where I mostly do it on road courses when I do NASCAR League races. But basically, it's one of those corners that just go on forever. Maybe Luffield at Silverstone, and by blipping the throttle just ever so slightly on on acceleration. What it does is it kind of pivots the car on the rear outside tire. So, for example, at Luffield, it'll be the rear left tire, and it pivots the car around that point. So it's trying to do a spin, but because you're constantly blipping the throttle, it's constantly catching the spin, then reapplying it, and it just makes the car go around the corner just that little bit further. Obviously, nowadays it wouldn't really work because the car's suspensions are so. They need smooth inputs. They need to be treated with great care. But back then, when suspension was about as advanced as I don't know a cardboard box, it was a lot more. It was a lot more permissible.
And just another thing here, in the 80s, we go back and watch the races of the 80s when they had the million C horsepower turbo V6s. If you watch the pit stops, like constantly, they're just blipping the throttle and revving the engine. Some have said that was down to try and keep the revs up, the turbo, whatever. I have heard from a mate who was well into, the paddock, not the F1 paddock, but just in general motor racing circles.
Yes,
who said that it was either another part of it or was the part of it was to keep the oil pressure or temperature to the level that it needed to be.
Yeah. Remember
so
this
maybe
was
more than one reason.
This was also back in the days of no pit lane speed limits, so getting a good exit from the pit lane would also be very beneficial to get up to that. Nowadays, it would be getting up to the pit lane speed limit as quick as possible, but if you can accelerate out of the pit lane more smoothly, that's obviously more beneficial. But yeah, I think George just needs to get a grip of these new regulations. As easy as it is to say that, if Kimi can, if Kimi can do it, and Kimi, I mean, there is the argument of it's better to go from learning from a clean slate than having to relearn how to drive. We saw this in 2007, how because Hamilton had only ever learned how to drive Bridgestones in GP2, he was therefore able to be on par with Alonso and Raikkonen, if not slightly better in the first half of 2007, because those two were coming from the Michelin tyres. Those two had driven on Michelins for the last 5 years. Like, as much as Lewis was good, it was also the fact, and then you saw in the last half of 2007, they were both not dunking on Hamilton, but they were both clearly better than they were in the first half of the season because they'd gotten used to those tyres. They'd gotten used to that tyre construction. Maybe you could argue that George is in a similar situation where Kimi has had to learn nothing, and he's he had a year in the old regulation cars, but he's a clean slate. He's a young driver. Like again, Schumacher in the 90s learned how to left foot brake before pretty much anyone else because he was more adaptable as a young driver, and he hadn't spent 20 years braking with his right foot. And maybe you could argue that I'm not going to say it's a change of the guard because George Russell is not even 30 yet, but you could argue that he's not. Well, it's not. You could argue that he's not adapting enough. He needs to find some way to make his driving style work. Sometimes drivers just don't work. Like Jenson Button was always in a very narrow setup window, and if he wasn't in that setup window, we saw at various points throughout 2012, for example, he was awful at some points in 2012, like fighting Caterhams because he just could not get the car in the setup window. I'm not going to suggest that George is on the same level that Jenson Button was in Monaco or Canada 2012, but he just needs to find him. He just needs to get in a window where he enjoys the car, where he can feel what the car's doing and regenerate the battery. Maybe the changes next year, 60-40, or if they change it even more, will benefit him. But the reality is these battery regulations, even if they are improved or mitigated or whatever in the next 4 years, they're staying here until 2030. And if he can't prove himself as a top driver in these regulations, what use is he to Mercedes? Like we talk about Max and potentially moving teams. If there's a point where at the end of this year or next year where George is just considered a driver like Piastri who can perform sometimes rather than all the time, like we thought of him before, then he can easily be deposed. I mean, he can easily be deposed for Max anyway. He could win the championship this year by 100 points and Mercedes will still find a way to put Max in the car, but they'll have even more reason to do so if George is underperforming.
Right, let's try and get this back on track. Let's just power through Hungary, and then we can the race we missed, and then we'll go team by team. Hungary, so that was a strategically kind of up and down race. Again, George had a mare with that terrible start and never really recovered. We saw a McLaren win, which was kind of surprising. Admittedly, maybe wasn't the McLaren that was supposed to have won it because Piastri got hit by a back marker, which hasn't happened, I don't think, since Carter-Cayen. I'm surprised it doesn't happen more often. No, Esteban Ocon. I'm surprised it doesn't happen more often, to be honest. But otherwise, and like Kimi salvaged. Did he get third in the end, or he got screwed by he pitted just before that virtual safety car? Lewis got another. What did the penalty for Lewis for? Speeding in the pit lane or
something like that.
He got another
speeding
penalty.
Speeding in the pit lane and impeding in qualifying.
Yeah. He got 2 penalties, didn't he? Yeah. So that kind of put things in an interesting picture for this summer break, I thought.
I will say,
yeah.
Oh,
you go.
I was gonna say that the difference with Sainz and Piastri and Ocon and Verstappen in Brazil, or Carter-Cayen and Vettel in Malaysia 2012 is that Sainz is wholly at fault, entirely at fault for that incident. Ocon, I can't even particularly remember exactly how the Ocon Verstappen incident happened. What I do know is that it was very mixed. People saying completely Verstappen's fault, people saying completely Ocon's fault. Why is he there? With Vettel and Carter-Cayen, I think it was the case. I can't remember if it was. I think it was the case that Vettel ran into Carter-Cayen rather than Carter-Cayen running into him, or it was something that because Vettel at that time would sometimes just overtake people without realizing where they were on the circuit, or that they would just back out. And with Sainz and Piastri, obviously that wasn't the case. I think that there were also some blue flag malfunctions with the whole system that was going, like with the whole, because there were lots of drivers who weren't getting out of the way, and I think that was just an amalgamation of that. Again, whether it was the FIA needing to fix their digital systems or what, or they just need to do what IndyCar do, which is drivers don't need to give way unless they're being lapped for a second time, because I've never understood the idea of you're a slower car, therefore you need to let a faster car through. Like they will just get, and I know there's following and dirty air and there's potential things that could be played around with, and people could technically try and hold people up and whatever. But at the end of the day, if you're a faster car, you like the cars that are being lapped by other cars in races are probably a second, maybe a bit slower. Like last year, that might have been a problem. A couple of years ago, that might have been a problem with dirty air. You can't pass a car that's like a second a lap slower than you. But now I think that you just use a bit of battery, get by them, and then you try and pull away. I think that blue flags, in the way they're used in Formula One, are obsolete. I think the way IndyCar or NASCAR does it, where you have to fight to stay, or where drivers often fight to stay on the lead lap because it's such important for track position, should be in Formula One as well, because those series do it. And don't get me wrong, there are sometimes awkward races. Like I think I remember there was an Indy 500 a couple of years ago where a couple of back markers basically didn't move out of the way, and it gave the leaders some draft and basically kept them in the lead until the end. But that's just part and parcel of racing. I do think that if you force drivers to jump out of the way, it's detrimental to their race, because like back markers are racing too, admittedly not for points usually, but when you see, like, for example, it's very hard to, I remember trying to see just how quick Jules Bianchi was in comparison to Max Chilton in his time at Marussia, and sometimes you'd see laps that are 6 or 7 or 8 seconds a lap off the pace, and it's just because they're letting the leaders through, and they're having to lose multiple seconds at a time doing that. So just bin them off. Just if the leader wants to overtake.
Couple of things. So if you start getting rid of the blue flag rule, like teams like Red Bull are going to weaponize that to within an inch of its life, because when they had drivers like Tsunoda and Checo, they'd have get them lapped to be like, okay, now you can start blocking Lewis and doing all of this, especially at Monaco. We just see even more gimmicks actually in Monaco, because they would have pitted people or made them just slow down so they get a lap behind, and then you can just do what Benoldi did and just sit in front of someone and they can't pass them. Like that's good. That people would start doing that, I think.
That would happen anyway, though, if people are on the, like, for example, if they're on the lead lap, and like we do still see it when drivers are on the lead lap, like Hadjar or Tsunoda being asked to hold up the guy behind. I think that, I think there would still be some instances. Like I think in NASCAR and IndyCar, you aren't allowed to defend overly aggressively. You can't like do things that you wouldn't usually be able to do, like moving under braking or whatever. And I think that maybe apart from Monaco, it would be fine. I think that you're not going to hold people up by seconds at a time while keeping them behind under normal pace. It's just not going to happen in these modern regulations, which is why that's one part of the reason why I like these regulations because you can follow a lot more closely, and the overtaking is a lot more variable. You can pass into places where under the previous regulation sets you simply wouldn't be able to because you are locked into the DRS zones. That's one thing I do like about these regulations, and that's where I think it would come in. Like as I say, in the previous regulation sets, maybe blue flags were necessary because you could genuinely at some tracks be 2 or 3 or 4 seconds a lap faster than someone and not be able to get past. But now I don't think that's an issue.
With the incident you mentioned, like I think with Ocon, I would say that's basically entirely on him because Max was passing him at the center S, like as you would pass someone normal. It looked like he's having to do like a normal overtake, and then Ocon immediately tries to take the place back at the next corner. I kind of went up the inside and spun them both off, and it's like you can't. You need to get out of the way eventually. You've done it in a way that loses relatively little time, and then you try and pass him like literally immediately in a way that would have cost both of you time. So yeah, I don't. But with Carter Kayan, it's a little trickier because he was being passed at quite a crap part of the circuit, and basically he said that he got pushed out onto the marbles, and then Vettel just basically cut back across him onto the racing line and got the puncture, just kind of expecting him to just run off the track and get out of the way. So that one's probably more on Vettel, to be honest. But even so, it doesn't happen. Like even Mazepin didn't hit anyone when being lapped. Like it doesn't happen that often in the grand scheme of things. But I think at least with Sainz, you can argue he was a bit distracted because he wasn't running around by himself like those two. He was actually trying to pass somebody else, and that probably just distracted him.
That's another problem. Blue flags. They again. Sometimes the leaders are battling between themselves, and then they come up and put on a group of back markers. But leaders passing the back markers also ruins the back marker battle. Like, yes, you could argue that the 13th place battle isn't as entertaining as the first place battle, but those drivers have a right to be on the track the same way that anyone else does. And I think that's the way it should be. I think that you shouldn't be breaking up battles just because some leaders can't get by. And yeah, it might cause a few problems here and there, but everyone is in the same boat. And then if, for example, Red Bull pull some schemes, then you can have probably the very important talk of why are Red Bull the only team who are allowed to do this? Why did they ban McLaren from having a B team in 2008? If you're going to allow one team to have it, why not allow another team to have it and then make them sell it off? And then you don't have these issues because it's not just blue flags or whatever where Red Bull having a second team is a direct advantage to them. It's the whole driver market. It's the whole they basically hold their drivers hostage. Like Liam Lawson, if Racing Bulls wasn't a junior team and it was just a normal team, he could go anywhere. He could go to any sort of midfield team or lower back marker team and hold his own, and he would be kind of whatever. But now he's in a situation where he could genuinely just be out of Formula One despite being a very Formula One capable driver because his doors are closed. I think unless he does like what Carlos Sainz did in 2017 and move to another midfield team and then make a career in the midfield and upper midfield, he's in a situation where he could genuinely be a Formula One level driver, like Jean-Eric Vergne, like Danny Kvyat, who really weren't given the chances because they were locked into that Red Bull suite. Like Jean-Eric Vergne could have easily gone on to have a good career in the midfield. Kvyat could have done the same. I mean, Kvyat did, to be fair, luckily, because he managed to get back into Formula One. There have been so many drivers, same with Buemi and Alguersuari. Those two were if the three new teams had carried on a bit longer or in a bit better circumstances, they could have easily been like what Kovalainen and Trulli were to Lotus. Very capable drivers who just bring it home, giving the car 99% of what it's worth. Yeah, that's the talk of whether Racing Bulls deserves to exist is another topic entirely.
Yeah. Back to Hungary. Anyone else got anything on it or remember it at all?
Verstappen's
It's easier to remember.
Oh yes, Verstappen's overtake. That was amazing. Yeah, Ciaron hated that for some reason. People do this on X. They complain whenever everyone does an amazing overtake because it's not scripted enough or it's not in the rules. And it's like, yeah, well, they didn't touch, so it's fine.
Yeah.
Max about it, didn't he?
Yeah.
Everyone's like, oh, that's really good, but he moaned about it. So, all right, then, fine.
I mean, Lewis, I don't think even Lewis was complaining about it. He was just like, fair play, why not? Good homage to Spa 2000.
If you hate that pass, you hate racing. Irrespective of what side of the fence you're on. That was sweet. There are some moves that happen in the sport where you're like, that's just sweet. That and Leclerc around the outside of Lewis at Comps 2022.
Yes.
In the race. on old hard tires against soft tires.
Yeah.
Like the fact that we're both on Lewis, not like a thing. He just so happened to be there, but you appreciate those good passes. They're the ones that, especially for me, when it's 2 a.m. over here, where you're like, whoa, okay, something's happening now. Like, so you have to appreciate those moments, especially when he knew that he had to pass in that moment, because that Red Bull is a deer on ice compared to the Ferrari. So, yeah, I'm amazed that Ciaron, of all people, would have hated that move. Like, that's a bit perplexing.
It's a Ricciardo type late lunge. So I guess he doesn't like late lunges like Daniel.
Late lunges, but
I'm trying to think of late lunges.
When I think of late lunges, there's Ricardo, but there's also 07, 08 Lewis, where he made some of those.
Interlagos.
You know what I mean? Interlagos, Monza. There was some where he came from.
Didn't he miss the chicane at Monza at 1 year because he tried one of those late dive bombs, or was that someone else? It might have been.
He tried braking from friggin' Switzerland. He was coming from that far back.
Well, there was 2019 when he tried to pass Leclerc. Leclerc kind of pushed him off.
I'm trying to think of his McLaren days. I'm trying to think of his McLaren because I know he had the thing with Rosberg in 2014. I think
he crashed into Massa in 2010. That was one of the ways he threw the championship.
2010, 2011.
That was when his tire went funny.
2010, 2011. He had that blood feud with Felipe.
Yeah. But Monza, I mean, the thing about Monza is it's an amazing circuit, but it hasn't produced that many good races in a very long time. So it's actually hard to remember individual races there.
It's because during the DRS era, DRS did nothing. So you were just kind of sat there going, well, this is just a train. Hopefully that'll be... Yeah. I was going to say, hopefully that'll be changed with the new ERS regulations. And then I realised the main problem with the ERS regulations is going to be exacerbated to a wholly new level. I'm surprised they haven't, for example, considered putting... You know how Formula E have gimmicky chicanes on some of the straights to basically allow them to regen more battery. I'm surprised they haven't considered at least making some alterations. I'm not saying, for example, put a second chicane on the main straight at Monza, but I'm thinking, like, for example, they could do other things that basically allow them to regen a little bit more. Like, I don't know.
Go
I don't know
back
what
to
they
the
could do.
1994 Eau Rouge configuration.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
Yeah,
bundle chicane in Barcelona.
Maybe for fun, because the track is, well, actually they could only do it with the first chicane, because they just run the old Monza layout, just don't do the chicanes and just see how it works, because then there's 2 braking zones, the whole circuit.
Three braking zones.
3, I guess. I suppose they can't. Well, the thing is, they can only the first chicane they could do this, because the second one you can't. The old track isn't there, and I think Ascari the old track.
Well, you could. They have that configuration in iRacing.
The problem. I think the problem would be the runoff at Lesmo. If you have a braking failure into Lesmo at 210 miles an hour and you're going into that runoff, you're toast. You end up
actually a tyre failure even around Curva Grande, because at that point you're going a lot faster than you would be with the chicane just before it as well. So they never do this, but yeah.
To be fair, maybe if they'd have kept the old first chicane layout where it wasn't a chicane, it was 2 chicanes, that would actually help with battery regen.
Possibly. That was a really weird chicane, that sort of zigzag thing we had for a while.
It is very anti-overtaking.
Well, it was so narrow that you couldn't pass there. That's why people used to just crash into each other all the time.
That chicane single-handedly ruined the perfect season for McLaren.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it also it had nothing to do with Ronnie Peterson, did it?
But no, that happened well before the chicane.
Yeah, and 94 there was that massive pile-up that gave Emanuele Naspetti like the 93, was it? Like the second short
where Marco Apicella had quote unquote the shortest F1 career.
Second shortest.
Second shortest.
Second shortest.
Ernst Loof 1953 is the shortest, but I mean 1953. Like you look at those grids and you're just like, okay. Well,
especially the German Grand Prix, you just get a bunch of random Germans that have bought some like Timu BMW that they've renamed.
Yeah, and they would be literally minutes a lap slower than the next, than anybody with any kind of nous. So
I will just say, 1994 Monza was the race where Lotus essentially got bankrupted because Johnny Herbert qualified fourth, was potentially getting points enough to give them prize money to carry on into 1995, and then Herbert got taken out by, I think it was Irvine at the first chicane.
Yeah. There were crashes both years. Yeah.
What they're gonna change about Monza to suit these regulations is that the following next 3 years, it's gonna turn into a sprint weekend, to the happiness of, I think, nobody in this podcast.
Is that announced? Because I know that what's his
Not
face wants
announced
to.
because no calendar has yet been announced. They'll wait. I don't know
Well,
how long, but they'll wait.
I know that
But
Domenicali wants.
there's already indiscretions, rumors. Basically, I have Auto Sprint. I think a month ago said Monza is gonna turn into a sprint weekend from 2027 until 2029. Until the calendar is announced, it's not official, but we know it already.
I mean, I know that Domenicali wants more sprints. He wants like 10 a season, but the thing is, it being a sprint weekend doesn't solve the problems of battery deployment or anything.
To be fair, it could end up like drafting racing in NASCAR, because like there's a problem in NASCAR where on all the drafting tracks, the tracks where you're just slipstreaming off of each other and trying to pass each other using the slipstream, drivers are just spending the entire race pretty much in 3 wide packs, fuel saving and not trying to make any overtakes. You could have that where literally drivers are sitting in each other's slipstream at like 90% throttle, not trying to overtake, just staying exactly the same distance they were behind to save battery, so that they don't consume as much battery, so they have more going into the next corner, just using the slipstream essentially. And you could have these big slipstream packs.
Monza and Baku are going to be wake-up calls for how bad these regulations are, but it's going to send the wrong message to like Domenicali. It's not going to be, oh, maybe we need to change the regulations. It's going to be, no, let's get rid of Monza and throw in another garbage Middle Eastern circuit instead.
What they should do is just change the maximum deploy, because at the start of the year it was 9 megajoules, and then they dropped it to 8, and then they dropped it to 7, and I think it's now at 6 or 5. And now they should drop it to something like 3. Or even 2, or like if it gets to a certain like speed or like rev range, it should be like something ridiculous like 1 megajoule per second. And then
does that basically mean they get less battery power, but it just doesn't run out?
It basically what it means is it doesn't. It's not the capacity of the battery. It's not how much there is. It's just how quickly it can be deployed. So
right.
So it's just how quickly it can be deployed. So if there's a limit on how quickly it can be deployed, it just depletes slower.
So the cars are going to be both basically slower and faster at the same time.
They'll probably accelerate faster than they were before, but slower than they have been so far this year.
Yeah. Right. Okay. Does anyone have anything else on Hungary?
No.
Okay. Right. Let's get to the teams.
Great by Aston Martin.
Oh yes.
But
okay.
we can cover it with the teams, and it's no hurry.
Okay, let's move to the teams. So we'll go from top down. So start Mercedes. I mean, we've talked about a lot of things already, but at this point, yeah, it's obvious that there are some problems with reliability. But generally speaking, Kimi has driven pretty much flawlessly in and of himself at every race, and he's been fastest driver more or less at every race. George is now 60 points behind. So let's go to Jack. What do you think George can do or needs to happen to get back in this title fight?
I think he needs to remind himself that he is actually good enough of competing at the very top. We've seen it since Canada. His performances have they've just disappeared. They're out there now. They've just gone. And it is a shame. I mean, I'm not the biggest fan of George, and I've said that plenty of times before to various different people. But he is capable of winning races. He is capable of fighting at the very top. And we've seen it in the last 5 or however many races. He's just not been anywhere. He seems to be kicking himself every single race. And it's painful to watch. And I feel sorry for the guy, because he's clearly... I genuinely think he feels like he's being forced out in a way by little Kimi. And it's got nothing to do with, it's not Kimi's fault, of course, but I feel like he may be potentially feeling let down by Mercedes, and it's a shame. But what can he do to bring him back? I think this summer break probably came at the right time for him, where he could really put in a good month of rest and recovery, and to really get his head back into shape and really go for it in Holland and the rest of the races there. But I just think he just really needs to just relax and just keep reminding himself that he is good enough. And we've seen it before. I mean, Lando's gone on record talking about his mental state of mind and how it affects his racing. And again, I feel like George is feeling so much pressure that he just needs to relax. He is good enough. And I do hope he is. I do hope he can come back because, quite frankly, Kimi winning every week is a little bit boring. But yeah, George, he just needs to remind himself he is good enough.
There's not a lot more I can add to that, really. I think he's smart enough to understand and grasp the concept that irrespective of whether or not these regs are tuned to his driving style, the predicament is what it is. And he has to make whatever changes he has to make to be able to take the fight to Kimi. If he can't do that, he's going to lose the championship. But if he can get on top of that, and if he knows what he has to do, we know that he's got the capability to do it on ability. We've seen him take the fight legitimately to Lewis Hamilton over the years. We saw what he did at Williams. So we know what he can do. And in the end, 60-point gap in the standings to Kimi. But that was amassed in 11 races. We got more races coming up than we did to that point. We got, what 12, 13, whatever it's going to be, depending upon the situation with, what's happening on that side of the world. So, irrespective, it is what it is. And again, George is smart enough to understand what he has to do to be able to win the championship over Kimi. The ball's in his court now to be able to pull it off. Do I think he'll do that? Personally, even if he did know how to do it, I think that lead is too big to throw away. And especially given the fact that when it comes to the team, Kimi's not in the Ferrari, so he's not in a team that's going to be able to throw it away for him either.
Counterpoint. Max Verstappen came back from 100 points behind to zero nearly at the end of 2025. I think it is possible. Whether it's probable is another thing entirely, because this is not a case of one team. It's not, well, first of all, the two main drivers who are in this title fight are in the same team. So it's not like we had a situation with McLaren and Red Bull last year where Red Bull got faster as well, and McLaren also found every single way to throw every single race. We haven't got that predicament coming in. I think it is definitely on the mental side for George, because I can say, as someone who has raced against a real life Formula One driver, a current active Formula One driver, I can say that when because I do a bit of racing on the side, when you lose confidence in yourself, it doesn't affect your actual driving in terms of like your peak performance, because you can still, like we've seen with drivers who are aging or who are struggling, that occasionally once a season they will pull out, even if it is only once a season, they'll pull out a fantastic performance that makes you reminds you of what they did in the past. If the peak performance doesn't affect, it's the preparation, it's the average that loses out, because George has had a couple of really good races even after the first few races of the season, like we saw Canada. That proves that he still does have it. It's just the preparation that goes into it. If you get any part of the preparation wrong, if you get any part of the whatever wrong, it just sets you on a spiral. So whether it is setup work, or whether it is you have a crash in practice, or you have a couple of offs in practice and you don't know exactly how much you can push the car, something along those lines is what George has a problem with. He has a problem with I assume, because George is one of those drivers who I think thinks his way through a race more than most of the drivers. Because obviously everyone thinks their way through a race, but I'm imagining while kind of like what Schumacher was, where he's thinking of other strategies. He's talking to a team, and he is like Alonso, where his brain is focused only a small percentage on the driving and instead can think about other things. That's why Alonso and Schumacher are considered to be very adaptable, because they're thinking of lots of other things going on while they're driving. I think George is the same, and I think what he might be doing is microanalyzing the situation too much. And like, for example, he says, I need to brake in this certain way. And as a driver, if you try and think your way through a process of driving, like braking, for example, I need to brake a certain way, you're not going to do it. If it doesn't come naturally, it's not going to be possible. So you have to get yourself in a situation where you can get into that flow state, where you can get into the thing. And if George is in a situation where he's having to think his way through a braking zone or through an acceleration phase without it just coming naturally to him, that's where he will struggle. And whether it was, for example, Canada, where that was the one weekend where he felt at home, or any other weekends where he felt like he could finally do something, he needs to find his way back into that mental state, because as soon as he can perform consistently, he'll be good. Because again, we've seen with him, we've seen with Hamilton, we've seen with Leclerc. Hamilton and Leclerc haven't had perfect seasons. They've had ups and downs, but at their peak, they were pretty much unstoppable. Leclerc in Silverstone, Hamilton in Spain, they were very, very, very good. But those performances have come once or twice in the season, and that's not good enough. With Kimi, it's been, I don't know, 7 other races. I don't even know how many races we've had this season, like 11 or 12. It's been more often than not, is what I'm saying. And in a season, in a point system where every result counts, in a season where it's a long slog, more so than it ever has been, falling into these ruts and falling into these problems are doubly detrimental to your season. Like, again, 20, 30 years ago, it was a 16 race season, and you could have 1 or 2 races off, but there was like multiple weeks between races. Now there are so many triple headers, so many double headers, and again, the summer break will help. But now, if you get in a mental slog, what, like 5 weeks a couple of like 20 years ago was 2 races. 5 weeks nowadays could easily be 4. And when you're in that problem, and when you're in that system where you just aren't getting to things, it's worse. So George just needs to essentially find a way to naturally drive this car that works and is fast. And I bet he's been trying to do that all season. I'm not going to try and say that that's not what he's been trying to do, but it's not working. Something needs to change for him to get back to level. Whether Mercedes finds some better ways to deploy the battery with him, whether he finds better ways to conserve his fuel, conserve his battery and energy better than Kimi. Whatever it is, he needs to find a way to. He needs to be the one doing it, unless Mercedes fundamentally find a way to change the car to suit him.
So, in my opinion, Antonelli is not yet safe of winning the title, because first of all, it appears Mercedes is gonna bring an upgrade. So let's say with the new car, Antonelli doesn't jibe anymore, and Russell does. That's 11 races where Russell is gonna gain points on Antonelli. 60 points is not enough for that. What Ferrari is gonna bring a new engine, new aero package. What if Ferrari actually becomes the best car? Then Hamilton is favorite to win the title in that case. Frankly, right now, best case scenario is McLaren remain best, as it was in Hungary. And if Norris and Piastri win all the races from here till the end of the year, it's not gonna be enough to take away the title from Antonelli. As for Russell, he has to fix the problem. He's not as good as Antonelli with these cars. If he could fix that, then he could gain points on Antonelli simply through better execution, because that's the advantage he has had throughout the entire year.
It's interesting because going back to Canada at the beginning, because you mentioned about how like George is really at home there, and that was where everything started to really go wrong. Obviously, the mechanical failure wasn't his fault, but I think it probably did irk him that this is one of his best circuits, and he was having Kimi battling him so hard and not being able to shake him off. Because there, a lot of, especially Russell fans, will claim that the team is biased towards Kimi and stuff, and I am kind of partial to that, because it's no secret. It doesn't take a genius to work out that Toto is clearly just obsessed with Kimi, and he's been incredibly pampered and protected, and his upbringing was basically the same as Max's, but without all the torment and abuse and everything. So he's been incredibly set up for this, and it's like, if we are to assume that there's something fundamentally wrong with George's car, then I guess you'd argue that they are just favouring Kimi. But otherwise, it's a lot of what's gone wrong has involved George making errors in one way or another. But yeah, Max last year has really, he kind of blew every championship open because he showed that you can come back from such a big deficit. Admittedly, it wasn't against his own teammate, so that certainly helped. And with Lewis, like, the thing is that the Mercedes drivers are not taking points off one another, so it's not quite the same. And the gulf between him and his own teammate is not nearly as big as with Red Bull, because Leclerc is still a factor in this as well, and is probably going to be one since he seems to have got into a rhythm. But as it is, I'd say that, you know, I mean, to say they're clearly going to win the constructors' title, and Kimi's probably going to get the drivers' title, which sounds kind of really hard to believe, to be honest. Like, I mean, it's happened before, obviously, drivers doing it in their second year, but not teenagers, and not like against the likes of George and Lewis and whatnot. So yeah,
He won't be a teenager a week from now.
I suppose he's about to turn 20, isn't he? But he'll be the youngest driver by like 3 years, so he'll have
Yes.
that record.
Yeah,
but
I was going to quickly say, I think in terms of comparisons to drivers in their second season who won the title, I think the closest in terms of what's the word, in terms of how it seems, is either Villeneuve, because he came from, I mean, yes, he had experience in racing, but I think IndyCar is a completely different kettle of fish to F1. And also he was, I wouldn't say he was groomed by Williams, but he was definitely put in that seat with a lot of track time and a lot of, basically he was kind of like the industry plant, if you will, for IndyCar drivers coming to F1. Don't get me wrong, he was better than Hill in 96, and although he did kind of fumble 97, he fumbled his way to the 97 title. And then you've got, and then the obvious other kind of industry plant again, if you will, is Lewis Hamilton himself, how he won in his second season. But I would say that Antonelli in 2026, as a driver, but he clears Lewis in 2008. Lewis in 2008 was so mistake prone, and the only reason he won that title was because it was Felipe Massa in the other Ferrari. And Jacques Villeneuve, again, I think Villeneuve was better in 96 than he was in 97. So I would say that, again, Antonelli, and it is also because drivers are just better when they're younger nowadays. Like Lewis, when he was 20, was still, he hadn't even joined GP2 yet. He was still in Formula 3. Verstappen, when he got into F1 when he was 17, when Lewis was 17, or when Michael Schumacher was 17, they were barely starting their careers. And it's because of how times and trends have changed. But it is good how a driver like Kimi can be so emotionally mature. Like even if let's say the Red Bull was what it was in 2013 when Max just joined the team, I don't think he might beat Ricciardo to a title, but if it was, for example, Vettel in that other car in 2016 or 17 and Red Bull was somehow the best car, this is a lot of alternate universe thinking. I don't think Max beats Vettel or even gets close, because I think he would have a temperament that would stop him from doing that. Kimi doesn't, although Kimi makes mistakes and isn't perfect, and we talked about how he gets track limits penalties and he's not perfect, but he doesn't have the kind of arrogant young driver's temperament that so many drivers have had, whether it be Hamilton, whether it be Verstappen, whether it be Vettel to an extent. He doesn't seem like the kind of driver who is going to be super cocky if he does go on to dominate the way that Hamilton or Vettel or Verstappen have done.
Yes, but we heard him pissed on the radio quite a few times this year.
Yeah, but he doesn't sound like he's pissed. He sounds like he's crying. That's the problem.
Another thing on the comparison you made is that, yes, Antonelli in his second year has been much better than either Hamilton in 08 and Villeneuve in 97, but vice versa. First year Antonelli is nowhere near first year Hamilton and Villeneuve. So, I see this weird thing that for some reason Antonelli awful first year, and then second year nobody expected this Antonelli, and instead it is Hamilton and Villeneuve, who nobody expected to be so good on their first years, and then couldn't replicate it in their second year.
Yeah, I think different drivers have different paths. Some drivers come in really quickly, and some drivers come in with a big surprise. Kind of like, I mean, you could argue Emerson Fittipaldi was in that group of drivers who went from nobodies to literally. I mean, he went from being the third or fourth most important driver at Lotus to the number one outright in like 2 months because Jochen Rindt died and Jochen Mass. Not Jochen Mass, sorry.
John Miles.
John Miles. I don't know why I said Jochen Mass. John Miles retired from racing on the spot after Rindt's death. And he was actually the number one driver, and therefore he went on to be so good in 72. Yeah, obviously different drivers have different paths, and obviously I think the new regulations have helped Kimi. If the 2025 regulations had gone on another year, I don't think he'd be on the same level as he is now. But I think that clean slate 2025 was a decent but not great year from him, and so he could kind of build off of that. And it's the same way that if, again, I keep talking about Hamilton because it is such a good example. If Lewis had debuted in 2006, like I think there were rumors that he was going to drive for one of the back marker teams towards the end of 2006, or that he could have done that. But McLaren purposely didn't do that because he would have likely been on Michelin tires, which he didn't like. He would have likely been at the back of the field and not able to truly yes, again, you can gauge his performance against Christian Albers or Thiago Monteiro or Takuma Sato, but you're not going to really get a good gauge of how good he is. And the race experience he gains isn't as good as the testing experience he was gaining at McLaren. So that's why I think they didn't do it. And with Kimi, it was the case that had a clean slate, like Hamilton had a clean slate for 2007. He had the clean slate of knowing the Bridgestones. He had the clean slate of knowing everything, whereas his teammates had to adapt. And I think that is the main reason why Antonelli is so good. If the regulations had carried on from 25 into 26, I think that George would have had this title in the bag if Mercedes was somehow the best car still, which they wouldn't have
been. I wonder what team like Lewis would have been thrown in at the end of 2006.
It's Midland, I'm guessing. I need said Spiker.
Yeah, because it presumably would be somebody that's got some kind of formal connection to McLaren, or that they could just need a lot of money. So I guess Spiker, even though it's Ferrari engines, but it wouldn't have been Red Bull. Or if you went in place of Robert Dornos or something, or beyond, well, no, Kubica was there. I don't know. It would have been somebody, but yeah, that obviously didn't happen. Well, on the topic of Lewis, I guess we move to Ferrari. I think with this one, if Leclerc hadn't suddenly showed up in the past 3 races, everything would be a lot easier for Ferrari to kind of plan the rest of the season, because it would be a case of just back Lewis. Although that's easier said than done, because after he won in Spain, everyone, and by everyone I mean the British media, got very overexcited and was like, "Oh, he's going to win the championship now." It's like, yeah, not really. He's lost quite a few points to Kimi in the past few races through his own errors, and also he's benefiting from the fact that so far he's one of the few drivers who hasn't had any mechanical failures as usual. So it's even if he was still like bodying Leclerc, I don't think Leclerc would just willingly step aside like that for the guy that's been here for a year and a half and was he annihilated the year before. Even though Ferrari like to do this to people, they don't normally move over that quickly. Nedzo?
I was about to say, I was just going to quickly say one thing I said after Lewis's win in Spain. I said that we needed to see in the coming races if this was Lewis's best performance of the year or whether it was his average performance of the year. Because if it was his average performance of the year, then I think the calls for he's going to be a champion would have at least been in the ballpark of potentiality. That's not a word, but I'm going to roll with it. Reality.
It is, but yeah.
I think what we've seen is it might not be the best drive of his season, but it's definitely up there. And is that what I'm saying is it's not the average drive that he was putting on. It is definitely the case that it was kind of an out of the blue performance. And also the fact that he's not been perfect this year, but neither has Leclerc. I think that's going to be a problem why I don't think they'll be able to, even if like they do have the best car, I don't think that they will win the title, because I think that one, Lewis and Charles will take more points off each other than I think George and Kimi will, because as much as I think in some races they've been far apart from each other, in some races they've been close. But I think what will happen is Lewis will be great one weekend, and then he'll fall off the next weekend, and Charles will be faster, and then Charles will be great that weekend, and then he'll fall off, and then Lewis will be faster. So it will just be that kind of system. If, let's say, Ferrari are the fastest, which I don't think they will be. Yeah, I think that if Ferrari wanted to challenge for a title this season, they needed either Leclerc or Hamilton to have a fully consistent start to the year. Like, if you'd have taken their best results and put them together as one driver from each race, they'd probably be a lot closer to the front of the pack than they have been. Obviously, removing retirements, obviously, you'd have to do that. But I think that the drivers haven't been consistent enough. Both of them haven't been consistent enough. They've both been up and down. In a car where it's not the outright fastest, you need a season like Vettel had in 2017, for example, to be able to at least somewhat compete. I know he eventually fell off at the end of the year in terms of the car and himself, or a year like he had in 2015. You need a season where you're just constantly there, and Hamilton and Leclerc simply haven't done that. They've had good moments, great moments, in fact, but they haven't had that consistently.
I mean,
I don't have. Go on.
No, good, you go.
No, I don't have much to say about Ferrari. I mean, there's clearly Leclerc and Hamilton are treated as equals, and here in Italy, the fans do not look kindly upon it. But it is there is no other option. I mean, what do? You tell Leclerc halfway through the year you've got to be the second driver to Lewis, or the opposite. It's never gonna work. You're gonna break the team. So it is inevitable that Ferrari are gonna treat Leclerc and Hamilton the same. If they do not, the title is even more lost. It's gonna break the team.
I think my thoughts for Ferrari really kind of cover a lot of the other teams as well. And throughout this year, I've kind of been reminded, and this is slightly off topic, but when Leicester City won the Premier League, and everyone went, wow, that's amazing. But a lot of that was down to the fact that the other teams were not very good. And I kind of got that impression this time around. And I'm getting the impression that a lot of the other teams, including Ferrari, have just kind of given up already. I don't see any real fight. When Lewis won in Spain, it was all like, yay, that's all great and all, but I never really saw anything else come out of that, and I kind of expected that. But I mean, where did he finish? He finished 5th in Austria. Lewis did, so and Leclerc finished 8th. So again, that consistency is just not there with any of the teams. You're looking at the table, and it's just all over the place, except for Mercedes and Kimi, who is just pretty much yellow the entire way. And it's disappointing for me as a fan. And again, my thoughts for Ferrari cover most of the others. And again, I've got this belief that they've given up, because why would they spend millions to try and catch up now? I mean, yes, there's 12 races left, but realistically, why don't they just save up for next year? And that's one of my big things that I'm just not enjoyed about this season, is that it's just no fight, and it's just kind of going along like, oh, okay, here's another race, cool, that's over, 2 weeks to go to the next one, all right, okay. And yeah, but hopefully Ferrari can win a few more races, but I don't see them catching up to Mercedes anytime soon, if not anyone, actually. Even when Lando won in Hungary, it was just like, okay, that's nice. Oh well, it just seemed a bit bored.
Frankly, I disagree with that. I think Ferrari has at least one more shot at making the car the best of the grid and trying to take back from the air the title. So they're gonna bring the new engine, the one they've been working since winter. They brought a small upgrade in Austria, but the real upgrade was gonna be Adwo 2. So we're gonna have to see how that works out, and they still have one aero upgrade package. Instead, it is Mercedes that that was they felt safe, they felt protected with the lead, and so they were gonna focus on 2027. And now they discovered they are unreliable. Their cars keep having problems or retiring, and now they're gonna bring hurriedly a new Ado engine and also an upgrade package for Malaysia, I think. That's just rumors. But they're gonna invest some more resources into 2026, which was not the initial plan. So I think we have yet to see how the season unfolds. Currently, it's a 70% chance of Mercedes continuing to dominate. But I remember Imola 2021, 10% chance of raining, and then it rained a lot. So, the improbable could still happen.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think. Oh, sorry, Josh. Yeah.
Oh, good. Before we went on air, we were discussing just the history of Ferrari throwing things away. And that's why I'm tentative toward this campaign, because historically Ferrari have been a team who, when looking for how to upgrade the car, they tended to block out what the drivers were saying and tended to look toward the gods in the heavens for their direction. But the times where they did listen to their drivers, a la the eras of Lauda and Schumacher, had paid evidence. And there was kind of hope that, with the driver combo that they have, with Freddie Vasseur coming in, that there would be that push towards, taking on board driver feedback. At least the right driver feedback, and not 2022 where they tried to gear it toward the driver who couldn't hang. But it's, despite that, there's been years where it looked like Ferrari were onto something and then it all just crumbled and fell apart. So that's why I'm looking at this campaign, looking at what's coming, about the potential for there to be improvements upon what they already have, and they've got a decent package. I still can't buy that Ferrari will eventually overcome Kimi's lead and get the championship for themselves. And people want to draw the parallels and say, this will be Lewis's 8th, whatever have you, it's written in the stars. I don't know. History's not kind to Ferrari at all, I guess, in times like these. But we'll see, because, of course, like I said, they are at least listening to their drivers, and we know what both those drivers are capable of. People want to say, favor one driver or the other, but, to acknowledge that, well, Lewis can overhaul Kimi, the gap between Lewis and Charles is comparable to that gap. So, do you write off Charles this season already? There's a fair argument to that, but it's a tricky judgment to make, and especially for a dude in New Zealand who, at 2 a.m., has just lost his caffeine rush and can't string a sentence together, and has got his left eye twitching. So, yeah, it'll be interesting to see where Ferrari goes for the remainder of this year, but I know better than to believe in the Ferrari campaign.
Yeah, I think one reason that they're probably not going to favour one driver, or they're not going to favour Lewis over Charles, is if you compare it to when they obviously did in 2019 with him and Vettel. Charles was a fair bit ahead, and Vettel had made quite a lot of big errors that year alone, on top of the ones he made in the years before. So you could kind of see why he was also, I guess, on the way out, because Leclerc's been there for a long time, but he's not like old or anything. He's only in his 20s. And yeah, ever since he got the same brakes, Carbon Industries brakes, as Hamilton, that seems to have worked out quite well for him. Of course, another factor into why they probably can't take this championship is the way McLaren have suddenly stepped forward. Because, they started very weakly, and then we've had quite a they suddenly got very good out of nowhere. I mean, Hungary, that was a win fair and square at the end on pace. And if they can sustain that, that makes things very interesting for the second half of the season, because we suddenly have a third team really, really in play at the front. I don't think, even though Lando's 90 points behind Kimi, I don't think he's going to do what Max did last year, unless things really fall apart. But that's otherwise, I think, Nedzo would agree that McLaren, are certainly making things interesting if they can keep this pace going.
Yeah, McLaren could be a definite cork in the bottle. As Ace said earlier, I don't think they're winning any titles, even if Norris to win every single race for the rest of the season, they're not winning a title. But they could definitely stop Ferrari from trying any sort of advance, which would definitely help Mercedes. I think that Norris is, I wouldn't say in the form of his career, considering that 2022 and 23 were very good from him. But he's definitely up there. He's definitely, I think, better than he was last year. I think that's also partly because he's not in a title fight. And the same with 2024. He's got no pressure on him to deliver like the absolute best results in terms of like consistently winning. He's expected to put the car in a place where if he gets better than a podium, than just a third place or a fourth place, he's done a mega job. And I think he's done that quite a bit recently. Piastri's just kind of been there. I mean, at the start of the year, he was quite good when the car started the races, that is. But yeah, Norris and Piastri, they're doing good. They are doing well. They put the car where it needs to be. And if McLaren do perform well in the rest of the year, I guess it's a good omen for 2027. But other than that, I don't really like McLaren are just gonna, if they get second in the constructors, well done. If they somehow get ahead of Ferrari, well done. But yeah, I guess McLaren now they're not the best team, are just not very interesting because they have two drivers who are, Norris is very good, Piastri is also very good but not as good, and they're just kind of they're kind of like what Red Bull was in 2025 in terms of performance, in terms of like the first bit of the year, where they're in no man's land. They aren't as quick as, or previously they weren't as quick as Mercedes or Ferrari, but they were quicker than Red Bull and the guys behind. Now they're kind of on the same pace as Ferrari in terms of overall performance, consistently over the past couple of races, and maybe as good as Mercedes if they can keep going. But now they've got no prospect of a title. What do they do? I don't know.
I think McLaren should rebuild the momentum they had in 2023, 2024, 2025 when they brought upgrades and the car kept improving and others were bringing upgrades and it wasn't quite improving as much as McLaren could. I'm anticipating in the midfield, Racing Bull is doing this wonderfully. Racing Bull did not start the year as best of the rest, but Racing Bull kept bringing upgrades and the upgrades kept working. And now it's clear best of the rest compared to Audi, who has had to struggle with new engine and kind of rebuilding the team, and compared to Alpine, who started well but has not brought enough upgrades and has fell off now.
I think Hungary is a bit of a one-off. I don't think they're going to win again this year. The other funny thing to watch was Piastri being very, very angry. And I think that's the first time we've seen that, actually. He was like, "Ooh, all right, fair enough." It's like that quiet kid in school that suddenly gets really angry and you don't know what to do. But yeah, I think that's it for them this year. I don't think they're going to win again. And they're probably just going to make a lot of special liveries at different races and probably try again next year. That's all I got to say about them.
Yeah, that car's too inconsistent. One round it's challenging for the front running positions, wins even. The next it's at sea, and it's corrupted their championship horrendously. In terms of the drivers, The big thing that aided Piastri last year was the fact that Lando could not help stepping on his own dick. And I can forgive a couple of mistakes, 2 or 3 mistakes throughout the first half of the year, whatever. It's high pressure racing environment that happens, but it kept on happening. And it elevated Piastri's standing because he wasn't making mistakes and his consistency was a hell of a lot better. This year, that consistency is nowhere to be found. And as a result, we're not talking about Piastri in the same breadth that we did this time last year. And Lando winning the championship, it almost certainly has had some effect. I don't know. The second half of last year was a lot better from him, but he definitely seems as though he's settled into himself a lot more. And in Hungary, yeah, you can point toward the misfortunes that Piastri had. Lando drove away from him after the positions were reversed. So with Lando, when he's got the car underneath him, he can perform. Piastri's still got that mentality under him, which can, it's very Scott Dixon-esque. My question is, if Max decides he's had enough of Red Bull, is Piastri the driver that Red Bull needs? I'm not talking about wants, I'm talking about needs. I'm not sure that he is, because I'm not sure that Piastri is going to offer what Red Bull need. Although that team's a whole different kettle of fish. Nevertheless, so far from McLaren, junky, jagged, not quite where it needs to be. Hello, Ace.
Yeah, would I, right now, if we find more data or proof, I might change my mind. But right now, what I interpret last season, Lando, is a driver who, at the beginning of the year, didn't quite like the car. He wasn't driving well. And as a consequence, not only he wasn't as fast as Piastri, he was also making many mistakes. I don't remember at what race, but then McLaren brought a fix specifically for Lando, and from there onwards, he started going much better, less mistakes, more wins. And I guess this year, with these new cars, Lando is also driving well, and we see he's having a hell of a good season.
Yeah, exactly. The thing about the upgrade is there is quite a bit of talk about how a car drives and how that contributes to what a driver's results. And, fan groups of certain drivers want to use that to prop up and say, oh, he's only losing because of this. That's all very well and good. But first of all, the best drivers of all time, typically, are what I call chameleons. You give them anything and they can drive around it. We see that with drivers like Jim Clark, for example, who, if you gave that guy, if you gave that guy a boat, he could just find a way to win with it. Or in his case, you can give him a ragged-ass gearbox. He'll go out for a practice session. He'll come back, it's brand new somehow. So there are drivers like that, for sure. The other thing as well is that, just getting an upgrade is not going to guarantee that the results are going to swing. Take last year for Racing Bulls. Lawson was tanking in the first half of the season, and even my patriotism couldn't save him from the fact that he was drowning on dry land. But they bought the suspension tweak. Things were getting much better than him. And that's fine, but it didn't negate the fact that Hadjar still buried him in qualifying, even after that. So it can help. It can help you get a bit of grasp on the car, whatever have you, but ultimately the cream always rises to the top. And that is the case with Lando. For however many failings Lando has, he's an astounding driver. That's what I was pissed off about him last year, was that he was getting in his own way when really he should have been walking the championship. And it's good now this year to see him getting his plaudits after, the early troubles that he had. So, yeah.
I mean, the Piastri situation is interesting because, by all accounts, this has been a terrible season for him. Not necessarily from his driving, because when he's able to just drive and crack on, it's mostly quite good. But he's had not even starting the first 2 races, and then he had, the team ignored him when he wanted to change tyres at the beginning of Canada, and then crashed into Albon when he was miles out of it, and then he crashed into Albon again, didn't he, in Silverstone, and that put him out. And then had the contact with Sainz. So there's just been a lot of things kind of spiraling and going wrong. And I think the word on the street is about, apparently because Mark Webber has now unfollowed McLaren and all of their accounts on Instagram, that people are wondering if that means he's thinking about a departure, which doesn't sound entirely unrealistic, because it seems like Monza last year was sort of his Turkey 2010 moment in terms of losing faith in the team and that. And then his response to that was, to drive and crash in desperation in Azerbaijan, and that cost him the championship that looked like it was probably going to be his up until that point. But again, the only place he can realistically go is Red Bull. And that's only, I don't know how bothered he'd be about having to go against Max. He'd probably only do that if Max leaves. And Mercedes is dependent on George wanting to. Yeah,
sorry to interrupt there. I would imagine the only way he's going to go to Red Bull is if Max leaves, because there's no reason right now for them to get rid of Hadjar. So that is circumstantial, him going to Red Bull. He's sort of in between a rock and a hard place now, Piastri, because yeah, sure, you could talk about being shafted by McLaren, but what are your options? And frankly, being second fiddle at Woking is the lesser of 2 evils, when your other option is to go to a Cadillac team where they haven't grasped the concept of what a brake does, apart from blow itself up. So, Mark and Oscar can get pissy all they want about the McLaren situation, but frankly, at least they got a seat in the Formula One grid. And if he's not being I know they got to have faith in themselves. I get that, but yeah, it's a hard sell to say that it's a hard sell to say that Oscar is a better prospect for a championship in that McLaren than Lando is when they're both in the zone. And Lando's not going to be the same mistake-prone dude that he was before, because he's got that title under his belt. He's got the confidence under him. I cannot see Oscar having the same opportunity that he did back in 2025. But yeah, his pathways elsewhere, frankly, it's going to depend upon a lot upon movements in the driver market, and whatever way they go, I don't know if any of them are better than what he's got right now.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, when has it ever worked? Let's be honest, drivers leaving a top team to go to a lesser team where they will, just so that they can have undisputed number one status. That almost never works out.
In theory, you could argue Lewis from McLaren to Mercedes back in end of 2012. That's a marginal.
I mean, that's not quite the same, because he wasn't going there to get number one status, and he never officially had number one status, I suppose, when you look at.
Do we want to say Villeneuve to BAR 1999?
I was going to say that was
yeah, well, obviously that happened, but that didn't work out, did it? He didn't win a championship with BAR. It's the same. The really obvious ones.
Races.
The really obvious ones are Piquet moving to Lotus and Prost to Ferrari and Ricciardo to Renault and stuff like that. None of that worked. I mean, to be fair to Prost, he came very close to winning with Ferrari, but it just didn't. It's like, you've got your number one driver. You're not being challenged. You've got some useless teammate, but you're not winning championships anymore, and you're not even winning races half the time. So was it really worth it?
Damon Hill from Williams to Arrows. He almost won the Hungarian Grand Prix. I know I'm clutching at straws here, but
also he was pushed rather than jumping, in that case as well.
I know, but I'm just trying. I'm just
It's-
delving
that's the
into
thing,
things here.
There are really not that many examples of this. There were like.
That's why it stood out, because it just doesn't happen.
Yeah. Like when Vettel.
in 91 going to Williams.
Yes, I
Who going to
suppose.
Williams,
Mansell to Williams, but then the thing is, he was going to a better team than the one he was already at. So, yeah, and that's not if they were a midfield team and he turned them around and brought them up and did that, then sure, but otherwise, not really.
I mean, they weren't great in 1990.
No, but they could have been worse. So they'd been winning championships literally like 3 years before that, and they were still winning races and stuff. Oh god. Well, Michael to Ferrari was, well, the issue was never that he didn't have number one status at Benetton, because he obviously did, and it took a few years to get going. But that's not quite the same, because Ferrari were, for all their faults, they were not terrible around that time. Yeah, it doesn't have
It's
a very
not
often,
something that
basically.
happens.
No. And it's like, and his only saving grace is that, okay, a lot of drivers, their contracts are up for expiring at the end of this year, so there might be, that gives potential for moving around, although admittedly there's probably not going to be much moving around. Yeah, so I think he's kind of, for the time being, he is kind of stuck. And a lot of things, it's funny how one half of the grid, everything is dependent basically on Max quitting, and the other half of the grid, everything is dependent on Stroll quitting and freeing up space for movement and everything. It seems to be how it goes. But of that front half, if we look at Red Bull, no one buys into that Aduo thing saying they've got the best engine, and apparently the people who did that don't even believe it themselves now, because they feel, it's actually faulty data. It's like, yeah, you don't say. They clearly don't have either the best power unit or the best chassis. Max, as much as he is being as indifferent and uncaring as possible, and constantly basically trying to troll the media by talking about retirement, he's driving mostly fairly well, other than the crashing. But yeah, he's. Yeah, I don't know. It's a tricky. He's going to go eventually. We all know, but he's still, for the most part, it's getting kind of good. Past few races have been good. Hadjar, I am extremely impressed with. They finally found a second driver that actually knows what they're doing. Whether that's because the car, it's obvious that Max doesn't like it, and maybe that's why, because it's not tailored to him, so it's just a bit more agreeable with other people. But either way, Hadjar he's doing what was a good weekend for Tsunoda, like every weekend, so that's a good start. No podiums yet or anything, but he's still driving the car pretty well. Yeah, Josh, what do you think?
Yeah, just start off on Hadjar first. It's difficult to say, and I'm not saying that to save anyone else's skin. It's just he has come in at a time of regime change and of regulation changes, which have shaken things up and down the grid. But irrespective of that, like, you take Belgium, for example. That was a stellar weekend from him. Like, fantastic drive through the field on the strategy that he had. Silverstone as well, he out-qualified Max there. Legit. So he's had a lot of times this year where he wasn't peak performance necessarily, but he just drove a solid race. And that's all you really need out of him. So good from him. At the same time, if Max left, there is a bit of a bridge that he has to cross to be able to match the results that Max was getting, because so far this season, Miami, he was fast in Miami, but he was meandering around like a drunk on a slip and slide, and he was probably over the border when it comes to the aggressiveness. And I know some people like that, but I don't know, that it felt a little rancid at times. However, was it after that race? I can't remember what it was, but I think it was a string of 8 races or something like that, where had not for the mechanical failure in Monaco and the rear wing failure in Silverstone, every race he would have been within the top 4. And that fucking car. So, it's been sort of understated-ish, albeit brilliant season so far from Max in a lot of ways. How he got second in Hungary is beyond me. He has constantly been bitching and moaning, constant melodrama about him wanting to look at other options because of the racing regulations, yada, yada, yada. It might be, I think I totally get where he's coming from, where he's probably looked at his career so far and just thought, I think I've done well enough. I've done what I need to in the sport. I could do anything else I want. And hell, who else wouldn't want to spend their days having been a Formula One world champion, being a nomad around the world and going to all the major endurance events? Hell, do Dakar, do Le Mans, do whatever you want. You've done everything in F1 almost. Just go and enjoy the rest of your racing career, run your own team, everything like that. He's probably got that in his mind. And wants to do it before he starts turning 40, whatever have you. I don't know. I wouldn't necessarily want him to go, but yeah, I guess we'll see. But for the time that we've had him so far this year, not a hell of a lot of complaints, apart from that Miami race, of course, and he probably also, needs to know, look, we get it. You hate these regs. Guess what? The rest of us do. So, yeah. Just briefly as well. Sorry, Nedzo. I'll let you talk in a sec. This Red Bull team needs to be careful. The regime in charge, the people running the show, because without Max's results this year, this team is lost at sea. That car is getting is both getting better and worse somehow. It's not disintegrating anymore, and there aren't as many failures, but you're having the little PK in, I know people call him the little Prost, but he reminds me of PK more. Isaac is saying he's scared to drive the car. Max can barely get a handle on it. Meanwhile, you got Lauren Mackey saying, oh, we're getting better and better. It's like, really? You reckon so? I'm not entirely convinced that this Red Bull outfit have a clear direction in where they want to go to. They're talking with regards to Max's replacements as being either Oscar Piastri or Oliver Behrman. The question I have is, are any of those two drivers a marketable improvement in terms of overall talent over an Arvid Lindblad and long-term prospects of Arvid Lindblad or Nicholas Solov? Because if they're not, you're backlogging and rubbishing this academy that you're dumping millions of dollars into for a temporary fix on a chance that may or may not work. And Red Bull has a history, even back in the days of Marco, who tended to judge his drivers off Wikipedia or whoever was doing well that weekend that he got word back from drivers in his own racing team. Like that those knee-jerk reactions when it comes to signing drivers don't work. They pissed around back in 2023 when they signed Nick DeVries, when they could have just put in Liam Lawson, and after 2 years, you would have been like, okay, he's not all that. Fine, put Ayumu Iwasa in there. Try him for 2 years, and then you see whether or not he's worth keeping in there. Then you can put Nicholas Solov in there in 2027. But instead, they didn't. They pissed around with a couple of drivers who they didn't have faith in. Then they brought in a dude who they said they didn't initially have faith in, and we're in this friggin' mess. So in the end, like, that team right now is being held together by Max's results, and if Max leaves, that team will be in dire straits because they won't have Max to save them, and right now I'm not sure that team knows what direction it wants to go in. My TED Talk is done. Nedzo, you go.
Right, first of all, you said if Piastri or Behrman were to come into that seat, if they'd be a marked improvement on Lindblad in the long term or Solov in the long term. I don't think long term is what they would need to. I think that, but as much as Behrman and Piastri are, well, Piastri is somewhat young. Behrman is definitely young in terms of talents. I think that they would, even at their current age, there would be a stopgap until they see where Lindblad and Solov are. If Lindblad is the next big thing, and he has a less, because this year he's been good, but he's been quiet and he hasn't really put anything on the table in terms of wow, that's a fantastic drive. Definitely not the way that Lawson has. I know Lawson's got a couple of years on him, but I think that Behrman or Piastri could definitely be a stopgap for at least a season or so. As much as I wouldn't want, as a Behrman fan, I wouldn't want Behrman to go into a situation where he is just considered like a stopgap. That's what they would use them for. So I don't think they'd be considering long-term gains unless they were kind of gonna have Behrman and then ditch Hadjar and go for Lindblad as well. That would be the only situation I could see that working. But then again, then you'd have to get rid of Hadjar, who I think, although I don't think Hadjar is a world beater, I don't think he has the same potential that Lindblad has. I don't think he's bad either. So there is that situation. Also, when it comes to Verstappen and Red Bull, people have been saying that he doesn't like the regulations, therefore that's why Hadjar is closer. I just think it is because the regulations are newer. Like you saw at the start of 2022, Perez was infinitely closer to Verstappen than he was in 2021. Even in, like, for example, 2019, Gasly was not that far, like, compared to what Perez and Tsunoda were at their worst. Gasly and Albon, for example, were not as far away from Verstappen as Perez and Tsunoda were at their worst. And it's because those 2019 and 20 cars because Verstappen hadn't been the number one driver for long, hadn't been geared towards him as much as they were. So I think that the gaps between Verstappen and Hadjar are not entirely, but 90%, 80% down to the fact that they haven't had time to gear that car towards Verstappen. Because, again, this is what we saw. We saw with Tsunoda, we saw with Perez. As soon as they got out of those Red Bull systems before or slightly, whether slightly before or slightly after, they saw marked improvements in their form. And I'm not going to suggest that Tsunoda was an amazing Formula 1 driver. He wasn't. He was plain average at best. But because the car was geared so towards Max, it was the case. What my point is, Verstappen is not, even if Verstappen outwardly hates these regulations, that doesn't affect how he drives them. He's still, in my opinion, in the conversation for being the best driver in Formula 1 right now on pure form. Because you don't just lose your ability overnight. Like, Jacques Villeneuve outwardly hated the groove tyres coming in at the start of 1998, yet 1998 to 2002 were inarguably the best years of his career. It's just that he was in bad cars and couldn't prove it. Drivers throughout history have outwardly disliked regulations and yet still performed great in them. It's not a benign concept. Like, there have been drivers who, for example, don't like regulations because they don't suit their driving style. That's different. Prost didn't like active cars, therefore he wasn't as dominant in active cars. Mansell loved the active cars, so he was more dominant than Prost was. That's different. But when you have regulations like we have now, like, that don't... Yes, they obviously, we talked about how the driving styles have benefited or worsened George and Kimi. But Verstappen hasn't lost performance because his driving style doesn't suit the regulations. He hasn't. He just simply hasn't. It's just that he outwardly dislikes them, and he's the one who's most vocal about it, like Villeneuve was in '98. When people said, "Oh, he fell off because he didn't like the groove tires." Like, no. If you look at his performances against his teammates in BAR, he was absolutely dunking on the likes of Zonta and Panis, and until Button came along, he was absolutely dunking on them. So to say that Verstappen is not liking these regulations and therefore he's not good, like, as I say, he can dislike the style of racing, but it doesn't mean he's not good at it. And that's what it is. He just wants it to change so that he can have more fun intrinsically, because I do think that Verstappen doesn't care if he doesn't see any prospect of immediate titles, he will go to endurance. He will go off and do his own thing. But I don't think that. Do I think he'll leave Formula One imminently, like in the next year or two? It very much depends on what Red Bull do. I've heard people say he might go to Aston Martin. I don't think so. I think that if he's going to stay in F1, it's going to be with Red Bull. if he leaves F1, it's going to be to probably WEC, and then he might come back in a few years. He might say, actually, no, I'm going to make this big move, whether it be to Mercedes or Ferrari or somewhere else. But I don't think he's going to outright. I think it'll be dependent on Red Bull's performances, and Behrman could be a good replacement. Piastri could be a good replacement, but only if they then rejig the entire team and get rid of Hadjar, which I think would be a shame because Hadjar is as I said, I don't think he's a true top amazing talent, but I think he could get to the same level that Carlos Sainz was, or like Sergio Perez was in his peak, where he's not one of the top drivers, but he's not one of the midfield drivers. He's in that kind of middle ground, like he would win F1.5, if you will. He would. He's a great driver for a top team, as in the second driver slot, or he's a great driver for an upper midfield team in the first driver slot.
Frankly, any rumor that Verstappen leaves Red Bull after 3 years, I don't believe it. I don't believe them anymore. I mean, look at it this way. He's in Red Bull with a contract that pays him more than any other driver on the grid. He has absolute liberty on what he can do outside of Formula One. He has absolute command on what to do with the car, and both at the race weekend and in the development direction. And if they don't listen to him, then he throws a tantrum, and they'll pay him 20 million more just to calm him. Why would he go to any other team? He will never get the same treatment he gets right now at Red Bull in any other team. So he's either at Red Bull or he leaves Formula One. Frankly, I don't see any other possibility in the near future.
I mean, as a Verstappen fan, if he did leave Formula One tomorrow, it won't be heartbreaking because he's kind of like, to me at least, very much an old school driver. He is a racing driver. He ain't a Formula One driver. So, excuse me. Like back in the day in the 60s, you'd see Graham Hill turn up to an F1 race one day. Then the next day it'll be Le Mans, or the next day it'll be something else, touring cars or something. And he's almost like that in a way. That's why I like him for what he does, especially as he brings a lot of people into watching, GT racing and Nürburgring and stuff like that. And it's absolutely fantastic. So if he did leave at the end of this season, it would be more of a, yes, okay, it would be sad to see him not in F1 anymore, but at the same time, he's not going to be around forever. And we've seen so many great names leave the sport, and the sport carries on. And, perfectly fine without them. Can I see him going to WEC or GT World Challenge or anything? Yeah, but as you pointed out already, he can do what he likes, and since he's a 4-time world champion, he will do what he likes. Even if he has to sit in his room playing iRacing all day, he will do that because he just goes with the wind. Really, he likes these things. And again, yeah, as Josh said, it was Red Bull now just kind of moving forward, but they're kind of just staying still. And it's frustrating, really is. And my heart breaks every time something goes wrong with that car. Like Monaco was the only time I woke up on race day morning with hope and looking forward to the race, seeing Max win. Oh yeah, he's on pole position. It's gonna be great. And then immediate heartbreak and depression. Horrible. And Silverstone as well. So, yeah, you'll probably stay with Red Bull. I mean, a lot of people have spoken about him going to McLaren. I can see that, but also can't see him being at level with Lando. I just can't see it. It'd be great to see him. I think it would bring great entertainment to the sport and everything. Imagine that, Lando and Max being on the same team. It'd be fantastic, but I just can't see it happening at all. But weirder things have happened, and if he does go, then I'll give him probably a couple more years. He'll probably have another couple of goes at the title, and then he'll probably go. But I don't think he will lose sleep over it personally.
Yeah, I mean, even if Max goes, the Red Bull train has to keep chugging on because, of course, behind them is Racing Bulls, trying to find. Well, I'm sure they're thinking about replacements for him, but yeah, their car is working very well. This is certainly the best they've been, well, ever, other than maybe when Vettel was at Toro Rosso, I'd say. But it's the last half a dozen races. Both drivers have just been in the points, and they've been driving very cleanly, been very even. They've kept out of trouble, and the proof is in the pudding because they're now ahead of Alpine and on course for 5th. But it's also tricky because, I mean, Lindblad is having one of the best rookie seasons ever so far, and Lawson is driving well, but he's already tarnished himself with those 2 races at Red Bull, and that door is closed to him. And, there is the looming threat of Nikola Solov coming up from Formula 2. So, yeah, Josh, what do you think is going to happen to Lawson in the future?
I think he's still doomed. That second seat should be destined for Solov. And I'm not saying that because, to sort of throw a smokescreen out and make it seem, oh, well, he's not biased after all. It's more a case of, look at Solov. Like, look at what he's done in the junior circuit. And there'll be a lot of people who will point towards him intentionally running into Alex Dunn in F3 in Melbourne. But all the way from Formula 4 to Formula 2, his streak in F2 is not a surprise to anybody who's followed him. And you can just tell that he would be good in F1. And I want to see him get that shot. And Red Bull almost certainly will want to see him get that shot. And we'll see to it that he does get it. With Liam, yeah, this is his second full season in F1, but he still had time before that. And yes, he's doing well, for sure. How much further has he got left? That's sort of the question, really. I also think, personally, Liam would do well to find a seat somewhere else on the grid, somewhere where he could sort of put a stamp on his own territory. Like, let's hypothesize here at a Williams. And if his car development is as good as what's being suggested, he can help rescue that team from the doldrums that it's in. And, carve his own legacy that way, potentially. But being in that Red Bull ecosystem, you're always going to be in jeopardy. I don't know, third-year drivers in that team, they're not especially commonplace. But taking away the looming threat, which is there, which I think is going to overpower him, unless they want to send Solov to Caddy, that's been rumored. Judging his season, it's been really goddamn solid, especially in race trim. Qualifying's iffy, but in terms of the racecraft, it's been really goddamn solid, and that's all you can really ask of him. Not been a hell of a lot of bad points. Yeah, there was Miami where he put Pierre Gasly on his lid. Although, in fairness to him, the gearbox was failing. He couldn't downshift, and he sort of glided into Pierre. Apart from that, there's not many blemishes. Really, it's all just down to qualifying trim. And that's great. Now, when it comes to Arvid Orloff, it's been good for sure. I'm quizzical as to how much further he's got left as well. I have hypothesized that the second half of the season he's going to overcome Liam. But if he doesn't do that, I'm wondering if he will the next season. And if he can't do that, I'm wondering, because Isaac Hajar buried him last year, and Arvid's not carrying that sort of speed? Will he carry that over to Red Bull? There's too many questions around Arvid at the moment, but at the same time, for what it is, it's been solid. So combined, the Racing Bull team has been, or Minardi team has been extremely solid. They've utilized as much as they can with the package that they've got. So yeah, really solid. Not much more I could say. Nothing extremely good, just really goddamn solid.
Okay, I already talked before about the team. Exceptional job given the size they are and the resources available to them. Also, incredible job in how they handle their drivers. Basically, the team in their history has always had on average one rookie driver each season to coach, to grow. And they even got Lawson back after Marco destroyed him at Red Bull, and they've brought it back to this level. Lawson is doing very well. Also, I don't think Lawson is gonna continue next season with the team. The reason is very simple. What's the reason that Racing Bull exists? It is to try out new drivers to see if they are good enough for the main team. Lawson, they already tried. He's not good enough. Now he's there to be the benchmark of Lindblad, and Lindblad right now is basically matching him. Probably if he keeps improving, he'll be better. So I think Lawson is not going to continue at Racing Bull. And given the driver market right now, I don't think he'll find a seat for next season also. Kind of a shame given there's Bottas, there's Ocon, there's Albon, who all are struggling and could leave, but it appears there's other drivers for those seats, not Lawson. It's kind of a shame.
To admit, Lawson is one of those drivers that I forget is there, to be honest. I'm looking at the table now, and yes, he is higher than Arvid, but as you pointed out, that team is there purely to try out new drivers to see if they are top team potential, and he's already tried and failed at that. Arvid hasn't had that chance yet, and we'll see if that does come around. But yeah, I can't see him being around next year. And as I said, I keep forgetting he's there this year. But yeah, I don't. They are having a good, solid season. So I haven't really got much else to say about them.
The problem with Lawson is he is definitely the drivers that Ace mentioned are struggling. Ocon, Albon, and Bottas. I think in terms of driving ability, he's clear of Albon and Bottas. There's no doubt about that. Ocon is more kind of because Ocon's very much a form driver. When he's on form, he's brilliant. When he's off form, he's just air. So it's maybe harder to do, but he needs to eye up those seats and be. I think I mentioned Sainz in 2017. He needs to try and do. Obviously, I'm not saying a mid-season move, but I'm saying get out of the Red Bull family before you're pushed, because if somehow he does stay on next year and he's not already looking for a way out, he will be doomed as soon as his contract is over. I think obviously Cadillac are trying their best to get Colton Herta in that seat, and I want to see Herta come into Formula One. I think the more realistic option would be Williams, because as much as Albon has been loyal to Williams, that's the only thing he has going for him. He's been objectively bad since the summer of last year, and he's not getting any better. He's 30 years old, I think, at this point. He's clearly over the hill in terms of his performances. He's never been that good a driver, in my eyes, and I've said this in podcasts multiple times before. The amount of times I've listed the reasons why, I'm not going to go over it again, but Sainz and Lawson is a great lineup. Sainz is good at car development. If Lawson is good at car development, that basically helps them out. Lawson is growing. Last year, he was known for his questionable racecraft. I haven't seen that from him this year. And he's got a lot of room to grow. That would leave options for, obviously, Lindblad if he stays on another year, bring Solov up. I mean, it wouldn't be Lindblad and Solov. I mean, that's not the greatest of benchmarks because yes, Lindblad is in the season and he might be better than Lawson in the second half of the year. But then, how do you stack up Solov against him? And that might create a backlog further down the line. But yeah, that's the problem. I think Lawson needs to get out of that team as quick as humanly possible. And I mean, if Verstappen was to leave Red Bull, then you could, I suppose, promote Lindblad up, and then you have Lawson and Solov, and that would then be Lawson just a merry-go-round yardstick, I guess, and then Lawson can spend another year trying to audition for other teams. But yeah, the best situation for Lawson, I think, is to go to Williams and replace Albon. And yeah, the Red Racing Bulls are in kind of a mixed position because there were a couple of years ago when they had guys like Ricciardo and De Vries clogging up, they didn't have enough good drivers, and then there was a time where they had too many good drivers, which was obviously Verstappen, Lawson. Well, actually, I think now they have an abundance of good drivers: Verstappen, Lawson, Hadjar, and Lindblad. They're all at least good. They aren't holding any places up on pure merit. But yeah, I think Lawson needs to try and find a way out of that team. And jump before he's pushed. More crucially, jump before he's pushed out of there.
As I've said numerous times, Lawson is he's the Yuri Vips that we have at home, basically. And I think his ultimate destiny is going to be to join all of his pals that have ended up in IndyCar, or maybe he'll try V8 supercars or something of that nature. I don't necessarily think he's going to set the world alight in Formula One, even if he makes a clean break with Red Bull, but we'll have to see. Behind them, though, is Alpine, who have kind of had the inverse in that they started really strongly and they've kind of started falling off a bit and gotten behind. But it seems like, I mean, Gasly is driving as strong as ever, and he's been driving absolutely supremely ever since he left Red Bull, which was 7 years ago now. But just been stuck in, well, Alpine the whole time, hasn't it? Yeah, he's been there the whole time, hasn't he? Has he moved any? Toro Rosso.
Red Bull,
Yeah.
AlphaTauri, Alpine.
Oh, Alpha. He spent ages at AlphaTauri, didn't he? Yeah, yeah. But yeah, so he's been doing amazing since leaving, not being having to fight Max anymore. And yeah, Colapinto has improved significantly, but it's still sort of once in a blue moon type deal. And then there's always the question of, you know, the Flav. What is he scheming? What are his plans for this team? Because they seem sort of, I guess, maybe Nedzo would agree, they seem a bit listless at the moment.
There is one problem with Alpine that I think could cause issues. Gasly, I think they need to hold on to Gasly as much as humanly possible. He is basically the best driver that team could ask for. They're not getting a guy like a Hamilton or a Verstappen or a Leclerc. Gasly, and I've said this before, he is the kind of driver like a Carlos Sainz, who, if you put him in any top team, he will not look out of place. If you put him against Norris or Piastri, he won't look out of place. He might be slower, but he won't be out of place. If you put him against Hamilton or Leclerc, he'll be maximum a tenth or two behind. Same with Russell and Antonelli. Same to an extent with Verstappen. I think if you put him behind 2026 Pierre Gasly against Max Verstappen, unless the car is geared towards Max's capabilities, maximum 2 or 3 attempts behind him. They need to keep hold of him as much as possible. But in that second seat, Colapinto, I think he's doing a fine job. He's not crashing as much as he was. He's performing, admittedly sporadically, but when he performs, he's great. But the problem I think I have is that, and we've seen rumours of this, that Alonso is going to come back for one final push. And I don't know why he'd do it, but if Alonso is considered for that seat, I mean, Gasly and Alonso isn't a bad lineup, but I think he'd also be wasting the potential of Colapinto. Because, I mean, Colapinto has been rumoured to also be going to Williams, ironically, with the seat for Albon. And I would love that because I think that was where he seemed most happy. Even if he was crashing every other week, I think I was also where he showed the most potential. Like, as much as he's had great races in China, for example, this season, I think that his performance in Monza 2024 is arguably the best performance of his career still. In his second race, coming in like a tiny bit behind Albon. I think that Colapinto is definitely a talent that needs to be kept in F1. I think he's on a similar level to Lawson, even if his performances are more sporadic. So yeah, if they stay at their current lineup, Gasly and Colapinto, perfectly acceptable. Good midfield team. You've got one driver who is going to consistently deliver all the time, and you've got a driver who is a bit more of a Hail Mary, but will also deliver the results when it's necessary. Yeah, I mean, they just need to get the car performance sorted, because there have been a couple of teams this season, and I think we'll get onto them in a bit, that have just regressed. Whether Flav is looking to just sell them on, obviously Gucci are coming on as partners for next season. I just wonder how much the merch will cost. Yeah, they're just kind of I nearly said they're a works team. They're not even a works team anymore. A couple of years ago, they had the kind of appeal of, oh, this is a works team that could go somewhere. Now there is no allure to go to Alpine. They're just another midfield team. They're just another Sauber, another Force India, another kind of maybe like what Arrows was in the 2000s or the 90s. Just a nothing burger of a team that you can only use as a stepping stone to other teams, I think.
So, yes, Alpine has declined across the year. I think I would wait until it's Zandvoort before finally decisively make this conclusion, because for the end of the summer break, they have an aero package coming, and they have fallen behind because they have not been bringing upgrades. So, if they bring the upgrade, they're back best of the rest, it means the pace of development is the same as the other rivals in the midfield. And therefore, it's not a bad balance at all. Instead, if they remain lagging behind Audi and Racing Bull, and probably Aston Martin as things stand right now, then it's gonna be a real worry. I agree with Nedzo that this team is a nothing burger. I mean, it's not on a trajectory to become a top team. I don't see what Briatore is doing to bring it to the top teams, honestly. So I don't have any expectations for that team.
Me neither. Again, they're one for me. They're a team that just gone under the radar almost. Forget that they're awful livery, okay drivers. Yeah, I can see Gasly being in a better seat, but probably not anymore. If that makes any sense. Colin Pinto, again, Alpine are just kind of just there. And that's where they belong. I can't see them getting any better, but I can definitely see them getting worse. And yeah, I mean, next year with Gucci coming in, they have a better livery, hopefully. But apart from that, they're one of these midfield teams that just really, really boring for me. And I haven't got much else to say. With them. And Haas as well. They're just one of those teams that are just sort of there, and they try and make a big deal out of things. And I'm just there, like, not bidding, to me at least.
Actually, I'll say something more about Alpine. The only reason it is currently there with that name is because the team is worth something close to $4 billion. The entire Renault group as a whole is worth a bit less than $9 billion. So right now, Alpine alone is worth half of the entire Renault group. And given the trajectory with which the teams are gaining value and worth, in 4 years, the team is going to be worth more than 10 billions. And so that team alone is going to be worth more than the entire Renault group. So that's the reason it currently exists on the grid with the name Alpine. Because otherwise, the CEO of Renault would not give a flying F about Formula One and that team. And that's the reason none of us actually believe that team is going to be a top team in the near future. I don't think Briatore is not trying to do that. I do believe Briatore is trying to get a top team, but he's gonna fail because he does not have the backing from the Renault group.
Yeah, not a lot I can really add. Gasly's been good. Franco's too inconsistent, but he can be good. But he needs to be consistent, and he's not. Alpine are treading water, going on Gucci, which is going to be weird to see on that grid. Gucci Racing, I'm never going to get used to that. Then again, how long did we go with Benetton? Which sounds weird, but they became a household name. I don't know. Again, it's a team that's treading water with two drivers that, well, at least one of them can definitely perform to the car's level. And I don't know. They seem to be going backwards more than they're going forwards. So prospects aren't good for the second half this year.
I think Haas are in a similar position. They feel just a bit sort of listless, and there's no direction, but there's also not really much of a proper identity since they've never. That they was their whole thing at first was with the American team, even though there's nobody American actually in this team. And this year, like, the car's very pretty, everything started very well, but they haven't scored any points since Monaco. They've fallen backwards, and I feel like people jump on Ocon a bit too much. It's like, okay, Behrman is beating him, but he's not. He hasn't had a complete collapse, and up until this year, he was just as good as Gasly when they were both at Alpine. And even across, when you look at their statistics across their whole careers, they're almost neck and neck in terms of points and race starts and everything. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know where it's going to go. I mean, we know obviously Nedzo will agree, but eventually Behrman's going to have a look at one of those Ferrari seats. But I guess he may have to wait a bit for one to become available.
I will say that your take on Ocon is correct. People are saying that Behrman is doing amazing and Ocon is doing terrible. Those two things cannot be mutually correct. Either Behrman is doing amazingly and Ocon is doing about average, or Ocon is doing badly and Behrman is just doing average. The gaps between them are not big enough for one to be doing great and the other to be doing badly. So I do think that Behrman is doing pretty amazingly well. I think that he's definitely at least on the level of someone like Pierre Gasly, if not slightly better. Whereas Ocon is on a similar level to someone like Lawson, where maybe slightly lower than that. He's definitely off form, but I don't think I think he's still F1 material. He just needs the look of the draw of a driver market. I know Rafa Kamara is searching for that seat. Although I'm not sure how I'd feel about two Ferrari juniors being at Haas, because then they just become a Ferrari B team. I know they already take Ferrari parts. I know they already have a lot of influence from Maranello, but I think that to have two drivers from the Ferrari kind of stable would be being too dependent on Ferrari. I think that if Kamara was to move up, they would have to have Behrman promoted, so then it's just one guy. I think they need at least one like kind of yardstick, if you will. And this is part of the thing I've said since Hamilton came in to Ferrari, that now Ferrari has two drivers who are irreplaceable in terms of they aren't going until they either stop performing or until they leave. And now we're going to have a situation where, I mean, don't get me wrong, we've seen a couple of times in recent years, young drivers who clearly deserve to be in the top team have to wait a year or two longer than they probably should have done because of a lack of availability of seats. George Russell in 2021, he should have been in that Mercedes, but Mercedes vetoed it because they didn't want a challenge against Hamilton. And that's pretty well documented. And now we're in a situation where you can't replace Leclerc with Behrman because it's Leclerc and he's the equal number one driver status, and Hamilton is being paid hundreds of millions and is great for sponsors, great for media, and great for the image of the Ferrari company. and he's performing reasonably well. Like, had he performed in 2026 the way he performed in 2025, there's grounds to get rid of him and replace him with Behrman. But now, since he's actually stepped up, he's safe. And Behrman will probably stay in Haas next year, and then they'll wait to see what Lewis does. If Lewis isn't concrete about his future, we might see a Schumacher situation, a Schumacher Mercedes situation, ironically, where Lewis went and replaced Schumacher, not because Mercedes didn't think Schumacher was good enough, but because Schumacher dwindled on his contract negotiations and just didn't sign on in time, so they just went and got Lewis. Yeah, so as much as I think Behrman could easily go into that Ferrari and at least not look stupid against Hamilton or Leclerc, it's not happening. He should only go to Red Bull if he genuinely believes he's never going to get a foot in the door at Ferrari, which would be silly because Lewis is turning 42 next year. He's going to fall off at some point. Unlike Alonso, who's took breaks, Lewis has never took a break in his Formula One career, and yeah, he will eventually fall off, or he will retire before he falls off. So Behrman is in safe hands at the moment, but he needs to be in that Ferrari seat in 2028. If he's not in that Ferrari seat in 2028, he needs to be looking elsewhere.
And what about the rumors about Toyota, the partnership with the team, and the fact they want Hirakawa at all cost in a seat?
Well,
What do you think of that?
Hirakawa isn't F1 material, so if they put him in over Behrman or Ocon, then it would be Ocon, obviously. But that would just be stupid because he'd be spending the entire time way further off Behrman than Ocon is. So if you're going to put a Toyota-backed driver, make it someone who isn't Hirakawa. Like, I know I'm not going to say Tsunoda because obviously he's Honda-backed, but bring in someone from Super Formula who's kind of got an ounce of potential over him. But at the moment, Toyota aren't in a position where they can just bring in one of their drivers because they haven't got good enough drivers. So yeah, if Toyota do start taking over, obviously that then means that Kamara is probably going to look elsewhere. And they might only continue any sort of relationship with Ferrari for the sake of Behrman because he's good. But yeah, Toyota coming into Haas would kind of screw things up because, as I say, they get all of their, not all of, but a lot of their parts from Ferrari. They'd have to cease that. They'd have to cease that and switch it over to Toyota if they're going to switch it at all. Probably hire more people if they don't switch it at all. A Toyota engine in the future. Again, they'd have to basically rebuild the entire team philosophy. At that point, they might as well just sell the team to Toyota because there'd just be so much going on and so much to be replaced that you wouldn't even. There wouldn't even be any worth in a Haas team anymore. I'm not sure if that's what they're planning, but yeah.
I think what they're planning is that Toyota doesn't like the current engines, but they like the view that Formula One gets across the public, and also they may like the next engines. So if the next engine regulations will be to their liking, they already have a partnership with Haas, they already have Alpha 14 in Formula One, and so they can very quickly develop their own presence to fight again for the championship. If they don't like the new engine regulations, bye us, and nobody's gonna say, look, Toyota has again failed in Formula One. Nobody will say that. So they're currently in that spot where they're waiting, and meanwhile they're trying to help the team with money and personnel, which Haas is the smallest team on the grid. They're not even hitting the budget cap, which is, I think, the reason they have fallen off since the start of the year. It's going to be this way for many years, unless they can finally hit the budget cap and become bigger.
So to give my summary from my point of view, it's not been a very good year for Haas. Really hasn't been. You'd think there would be at least a couple of positions higher than where they are. But again, we don't really see consistency from them over the years. And for me, again, it's another team that just goes under the radar, and I don't really notice, and not really interested in. Again, they like to make a big song and dance about being an American team. It's like, well, there's another one now that I can easily have more interest in because they do other things rather than whatever has to. But yeah, it's not been great. I still feel like, as a lot of you already said, Oliver Behrman is a very good driver, and I can see a very bright future for him. Ocon, again, he gets the job home in one piece. He gets the car home in one piece, doesn't he? And I think for now, at least, Haas, that's all they really need.
Same song every goddamn year with this team. They start off well. You get an inkling, they're going to actually do something a little bit more than what they did last year. And it whittles down to being sort of nothing. They fall back into purgatory. Behrman being P5 in the standings after 2 rounds was great to see. Then reality set in. Behrman, in general, has been good this year, but the last 3 races, he's sort of fallen off. Ocon's gone to the glue factory. It's pretty widely accepted that he's gone. Io apparently wants Yuki Tsunoda, and it's like, dude, no. Like, Yuki's decent, good driver, but no. Bring in Rafael Kamara. Got the Ferrari connections. He's proving his worth on the junior circuit. Let him have the drive. In terms of the Toyota talent, they have been pushing their drivers on the junior circuit as of late. But none of them are ready right now. Ryo Hidekawa has been good in the Japanese circuit over the years, but I don't think he's F1 material, personally speaking. Anybody in Super Formula who might be F1 material, you can't just put him straight into F1. It's not going to work. I don't care how good you are, because vast majority of that talent has not really driven extensively outside of Japan. Doesn't matter how good you are, that is too big of a mountain to climb. You got to get used to all the new circuits around the world that you're going to go to. It's not just Europe, it's everywhere else. You got to get used to that. Got to get used to the tires, the training regimen, the how to set up a car, just the whole culture of the thing. It doesn't matter how good you are. You're going to get your ass handed to you. So they can't plonk a driver straight from there. The other junior drivers, Ratomo Miyata, he's as good as he is. I can't say that his F2 campaign has swayed me. Kyler Rovanpera, it looks like his campaign's over before it's even begun. Jin Nakamura is good, but he's still a fair way away. I think it would be best for Haas to go with Rafael Kamara. That's the most logical step to take. And knowing Haas and knowing what I've just said there, watch them sign Yuki Tsunoda for next season, and for them to just tread water for yet another season where they'll start off the first two races pretty well, and then nothing will happen. Ace?
Just to prove the point you made with an example, Colton Herta from the American racing world comes to Formula 2 and is a complete flop. And it's not because Herta is that bad of a driver. It's because you've got to come from a different part of the world, drive on circuits you've never driven before. You have a different way of preparing the car for a fast lap. And he's against the drivers who have driven on these tracks already for a few years. It's gonna be a flop, as you said, if they just bring a driver from Super Formula directly into Formula One. It's gonna be a massive flop.
I mean, I'd very much like to see Toyota take over the reins and have another crack at Formula One. I think, because otherwise Haas is just there's nothing there. They're just kind of pointless. And I mean, Toyota, if they invest in it properly, a very heavy injection of cash as well. If it's dependent on Hirakawa being there. Like, I don't know, you can tolerate that for a year. They'll realise pretty soon on he's not like cut out for it. He's just, even if like with all the testing and preparation he had the talent, he's just too old to be like early mid-30s or whatever to be trying this. But yeah, that'd be fun to see Toyota again. Of course, you said the issue is that they probably wouldn't want to do it with the hybrids, and these current engines are stuck until 2030. It's like, do they have to be stuck until 2030? There's nothing stopping us getting rid of them in 2028. Because you could say, okay, we're going back to V8s in 2028. So they could announce that tomorrow, and it's like, okay, you can keep developing next year's car, and you've got a year and a half to build a V8. Or just take one of the 2013 ones and just improve it a bit as a base. And they're not thinking that far in advance in terms of development, so you could just do that. But I mean, they won't, but it'd be nice if they did.
Concord Agreement. That's what stops them from changing the regulations.
Well, the Concord Agreement. Well, isn't that's more licensing and like television rights? It's not. It doesn't have the same sway when it comes to technical regs, does it? Like,
I thought it did. I thought that the Concord Agreement that was signed for these regulations, it lasts until 2030, and that's part of the reason why. I think that's what it's been with all these modern regulations, where they go wide bodies and then they go ground effects and then they go. It's for a certain, and it's usually a 4 or 5 year period, because that's usually how long a Concord Agreement lasts.
Although that being said, they did, well, maybe an exemption in 2021. They did delay the new regs by
only because of the virus.
Yeah, obviously yes, but they still did it in the end. I mean, that's the reverse of this, because that's delaying something rather than
yes,
underlaying it. Yeah. But yeah, let's bring back Toyota. That'd be fun. Another manufacturer. Give it a go. Of course, there is another manufacturer that is new to F1 now, which is Audi, who I don't really notice them. Like, people say, "Oh, the car's amazing," and all that. And it's like, yeah, but is it really? Because basically every weekend something goes wrong with one of their cars. They very rarely get a clean weekend, and even if they do, they're just like monopolizing P11. There's been a few points here and there, but like, Bortoletto is fine. There's nothing bad. There's nothing good, but he's just fine. And Hulkenberg is still in the midfield after 15 years, and yeah, the car just is one of the most boring liveries ever. Considering what Audi have done before, this is one of the worst efforts I've seen from a livery. But they're just there.
Bortoletto is average. Hulkenberg is average. The car is average. I'm trying to think if there's anything that can be salvaged from this team in terms of anything that's entertaining. I mean, there's also the fact that people have said, "Oh, it's a new team and they're doing better than Cadillac," but not even really a new team. Like, yes, I think they have a new base in Germany, but they still operate partially out of Switzerland, out of Hinwil, and so apart from a couple of new people coming in and personnel-wise, there's nothing really that's new about this team. It's just Sauber 2.0, and it's as if, like, let's say if Audi gave up on the F1 project tomorrow, they could just sell it back to Peter Sauber like BMW did, and then they're just back to Sauber again. But yeah, I mean, if this is a base season like kind of what 2016 was for Renault, they openly admitted that 2016 was a build year, and they had a 5-year plan to go and win a constructors championship, but obviously didn't happen. But as I say, Renault went from this in similar performances to this in 2016, and soon became a stalwart of the midfield. So I'm not particularly underwhelmed or overwhelmed by what Audi have been doing. Bortoletto is someone they should keep because he's young and he's good. Hulkenberg is someone they should try and get rid of because he is literally pushing 40 years old and he's only getting worse. He's worse than he was even a couple of years ago at Haas. So I would aim for, I mean, Freddie Slater's the guy you want to get in that seat, but he's a year away from that. So maybe get someone as someone in as a stopgap, maybe like an Ocon or someone like that. But that's like the level of driver you need just for a year. Then bring Slater in after he potentially wins Formula 2. And then you've got Bortoletto and Slater and you're sorted for the next 10 years. And until one of them leaves for a bigger team if you don't get up to the top.
Oh, first of all, that you say Bortoleto and Hülkenberg have been average, I'm offended, honestly. I think they've been, at minimum, both good drivers this year. Then I've got a question for you, because you're not the first one I hear say Slater is a very good driver. And I'm not really following Formula 3 and Formula 2 right now. So can you explain it to me? Because now I'm getting interested. What's good about him?
Well, I know championship standings in the lower formulas aren't exactly the most accurate representation of, but he's doing pretty well in that. He's also extremely young. I believe he's only just turned 18 like a couple of days ago. And he's just got a lot of hype around him, and he's won he's basically what Antonelli was in terms of winning everything in karting and Formula 4 and Formula Regional and all that sort of stuff. So I think that he's definitely destined for Formula 1. I think they need to try and get him into a seat as soon as possible. They could. I don't think they'll do what Williams did with Bottas and go straight from GP3 to Formula 1, because I know he also did a year of endless FP1 sessions in 2012 for that to be made possible. That could be something they do with Slater, where they kind of have him in Formula 2, but then they also bombard him with FP1 sessions to prepare him for Formula 1. But yeah, I think he's definitely destined for that seat, at least, if not for 2028, for 2029 or 2030. And yeah, they need to get there. I think that even if Hülkenberg is doing all right or doing good, he is going to, again, just like Hamilton, find a way to fall off, because he's also a midfield driver. He hasn't got the peaks that Hamilton has. So they need to find some form of stopgap, whether it is Ocon or, God forbid, Albon or someone like that who's just not really that good but can easily be replaced. I think that'll be all right.
Okay. So just to close my... Oh, sorry, say, Peter.
I was going to say that, like Dino Beganovic, Slater has got main character energy because he's got tons of money behind him. But he only just won his first race in F3, and he's leading the championship on
He's doing
one win. What?
He's doing a 4 in a row from F2.
Yeah, and he's like, it's him and like what's his face, who's like 7'12", or can somehow still fit in the car, like fighting for the championship, and then a wad of drivers I've never heard of because I don't really follow. It's so hard to care anymore with Formula 3 and Formula 2, but yeah, he'll be there in a year or two probably. Later.
So to close my bit on Audi, clearly the main issue of the project is the engine, which they basically start from nothing as a program, and clearly it's the worst engine except Honda, which is a massive flop, doesn't count. But they have a plan to improve the engine. Even with the Adwo, they brought one small upgrade just to fix some drivability problem, and then all the effort is gonna go into the 2027 Audi engine. That's gonna be a step up, and then it's gonna keep going. That's the plan that Binotto has planned out for the team. Who doesn't believe in Binotto? Sarcasm. But anyway, the chassis on its own is actually very good. It's they did the thing that Mercedes did at the start of 2022, which flopped massively. But for them, it's turning out quite nicely. It's the best chassis of the midfield, tied with Racing Bull right now. And we've got to see how Aston Martin chassis is actually good now that they brought the new one. But it means that they've been doing a very strong job, even though there's no result, because having a weak engine so far, it means whenever they are competitive, they can make overtake. So Bortoleto scored points in Belgium because of the virtual safety car. Otherwise, he was going to be stuck in traffic, unable to overtake, and no points.
As someone who's a bit of an Audi well-wisher, well, historical reasons. I mean, them being side by side with Mercedes again after nearly 90 years, albeit not very side by side at the moment. I am glad to see them back. Obviously, as it's already been mentioned, they have the worst livery ever in terms of, in terms of liveries. But I think it, for the first year, you give them. I know they used to be Sauber and all that, blah 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 blah. I think, are having a good season for their first season, and as a well wisher, I'm quite happy to see them scoring points. Bortoletto's doing fine. I can see him doing better, and I can see Audi doing a lot better for the next few years. Give them 5 years, and they'll be up there in the top 3. You heard it here first. And yeah, I mean, Hulkenberg, he's probably going to retire with them. I can only see him lasting another year. But so far, so good for Audi. And on a side note, if there's anywhere where there's a clip of both Audi and Mercedes side by side or near to each other, please let me know. Thank you.
Not a lot more I can add to that. Hulk's been a bit unlucky this year, so with a few results that have hindered his overall drivers' championship positioning. Enrique Bernaldi Jr.'s been pretty damn good. Probably not as good as I thought he was going to be this year, but still, what we do expect. I still want Mattia Binotto to piss off. I have no time for him, really. And ditto too for the car's livery designer, who, while I would say I want him to be hung, drawn, and quartered for the poor job that he did, wouldn't amount to him, because to have a livery like that requires no balls to design it anyway. So, yeah. But Audi will improve going into the future, as has been said. So, but I don't know. I've sort of heard the song and dance before. Whether Audi's actually going to win the championship or get close to it. Better manufacturers have tried, better manufacturers have failed. See how it goes.
I mean, the only historical precedent on that is the fact that BMW came reasonably close to it when they owned Sauber. So if they put enough money in, who knows, but it's not going to happen anytime soon. Another team that won't get it anytime soon is Williams, who I'm kind of giving up on now. It's like it can't keep happening every time anything changes, that you just go back to square one and everything is shit again. Because it's like, okay, the problem at first was Frank Williams and Patrick Head had a very outdated leadership, and then Claire, despite her best efforts, didn't know what she was doing, and then Dorsal Capital went the wrong way, and James Vowles means well, but no progress is being made. And I mean, Sainz can't stand this because he's been kicked out of Ferrari and is now stuck here with this kind of amateurish operation. And, well, he's at least demonstrated that Albon really isn't everything he was cut out to be when he was destroying Latifi and Sargent. But I'm getting bored of them sucking, basically.
I think this is kind of proof that Williams was not a product of Frank Williams, really. It was a product of everyone around the team. Like, Patrick Head was pretty good in his role, and Adrian Newey was good in his role. And the design, I can't remember exactly who designed the 80s, and I might have been, I'm not sure if it was Harvey Postlethwaite or someone like that. But I think that they were definitely
Frank Durney, that was it. Frank Durney was the
Frank
other one before. Yeah.
I was going to say they definitely a product of their employees rather than Frank Williams himself. Because Frank Williams, he pushed Mansell out, he pushed Damon Hill out. Even though I don't think Hill's that great, he still pushed him out. Villeneuve left the team, Montoya left the team. Like, if you look historically, Piquet left the team. If you look at all of their good drivers, they all left in acrimonious circumstances. Pretty much all of their good drivers, apart from Albon, who isn't good to begin with. So that kind of explains that. And now they are just kind of going back to where they would have been without the guys who made them good. Like, Newey made them amazing. And then as soon as he left, they were kind of middling. And they had a couple of up and down years depending on their engines. Like the BMW engines, which were superb. And then the Mercedes engines, which were superb. but they weren't ground as soon as Mercedes lost their super dominant thing in 2017 with the engines. Williams went back to being midfield at best, and then back markers very soon after. So, yeah, this is just a product of what was always there, but it just wasn't staring us in the face. As I said earlier, they need to get Albon out of that team. Sainz is very good. He's delivering what that car needs, which is, if they were in the points, it would be consistent points, but it's consistent drives, if not anything else. Albon is just wasting a seat in Formula One at this point. He is, and I said this a couple of episodes ago, in terms of performance that we can measure from drivers who we can measure fairly in their teams. He's the worst driver in Formula One right now. And that is, in my opinion, pretty absolute. Get someone like Ocon, get someone like Lawson, even someone rogue like Fornaroli would be better than Albon at this point, because he's just, he has no racecraft. He's not got, because the main thing people said, okay, was his pace and that he could deliver somewhat consistent results when Sargent and Latifi were there. The one race that it wasn't Sargent or Latifi in that time period was when Nick de Vries was there. Nick de Vries, based on his performance in that one race in Monza, people thought that he was F1 material. He comes into F1 the next year, we find out he's not. The only reason that Nick de Vries was considered really good in that Monza stint was because Alex Albon, in the performances that he was performing, wasn't actually performing to what the car's best performances were. Rather, when people thought that that was the ceiling of the car's performance, no, it wasn't. Because if De Vries can get as close to Albon's average performances as he was, and then flop the next year, what does that say about Albon? It says that he wasn't as good as people thought he was, even in his prime. So yeah, his prime wasn't good. His racecraft is awful. His mentality, as much as I don't like to dog on drivers for, let's say, for example, Lando Norris with his mental health issues, Alex Albon doesn't have mental health issues. He's just too soft. He complains about everything, even if it's his own fault. He's like yapping on about being knocked out of Q1 because the car didn't do what he wanted it to do. No, you made a mistake. Deal with it. It annoys me because every single time he gets knocked out in Q1, he's like, "Oh, the car snapped on me," and it's like, "No, you must have put on the throttle too hard, or not steered into the corner right," because that's not how Formula One works, unfortunately. And don't get me wrong, Sainz is also a yapper. You look at the people have made like graphs of how much time drivers spend on the radio, and Sainz is always at the top by a country mile. So he's also a yapper, but at least he can back up his performances. Alex Albon has done nothing of note since 2019 when he somewhat got close to Verstappen. 2020 he was average. I mean, he was close to a win or two, but that's like two races. If Albon had potential because of one or two races, then Maldonado should have been a 5-time champion.
Well, don't beat around the bush. Let us know how you really think about Albon. Go on.
He doesn't deserve to be in F1. That's all I said. He doesn't deserve to be in F1.
It's really speaking, was never supposed to be in F1 either.
Yeah, he's supposed to be in Formula E, but Daniel Ricciardo leaving.
where's
Daniel Ricciardo
the
ruined
lie?
everything as usual.
Well, apparently Verline's won another Formula E title as well, but
Yeah.
I saw the feed through some interesting tactics to say the least.
He did a Schumacher. So yeah.
Oh, that's not fair on that's not fair on Schumacher. He did an Austin Dillon.
I'll have
that's outside my sphere.
I know.
You don't watch left-hand corner racing?
Oh, you mean it's a NASCAR thing. Well, NASCAR's they're always crashing into each other in NASCAR. Like there's like a 10-car pilot.
Not always, just the Nepo babies.
Yeah.
Apart from Ty Gibbs, he's doing well this season. Anyway.
Don't talk about Jesus.
Who was the guy? Was it Shane Van? It was one of the Van der Lindes that killed Lawson in DTM. And then there was
Shane Van der Linde
and Van der Linde.
Calvin Van der Linde, who for a time, honestly, because Calvin Van der Linde, this is going off topic again, but Calvin Van der Linde, at a time, am I right in saying that if you had an Audi R8 race car and you wanted to draft in a pro from around the world to drive it for you, it was either him or Christopher Mies or Christopher Haas. Like, for a time, Van der Linde was amongst the best GT3 drivers in the world. And in one weekend, for a lot of people, he soured, his image. It's all ancient history to me, but it's remarkable. His name came up, and it was down to that bloody race at the Norris Ring. Anyway, Williams, who's got the floor on this after Nedzo? Should I talk, or Ace, do you want to go?
Makes no change because I don't have much to say. It's a disappointment. The bigger disappointment is that Aston Martin completely flopped the car because they pushed their limits too much. They started 3 months late without the system. They updated as they were making the car. They pushed the deadline further than everyone else on finishing the car, and the end result is a slop of a car. They took another 6 months and they fixed the car. It appears to be fixed, the car. We'll see in the following races. But Williams, they literally stopped all progress on the 2025 car to focus entirely on this year, and they still flopped. What the heck? I don't have much to say about Williams. I hope them best for the next year, that they don't suck, but don't care very much.
See, I used to care. I used to care when they, went wrong. And I used to think, in the future it's all going to be great. Yeah. But now I'm completely off that hype train. That hype train, that's just crashed and it's now in a river somewhere. As has been said already, they just can't seem to get out of this hole. And I know that feeling. I know what that's like, but they keep trying, and they're still there. And I'm just gutted, but I'm not surprised. Yes, Albon should really, I think he should go by now. He's kind of like Stroll. He's just kind of hanging around for no real reason. And Albon could probably find, you look at Logan Sargent, he's found a pretty good seat in WEC next year, being a hypercar driver for Ford. I mean, that's pretty good. That's if the car actually exists. We don't know yet. So I think Albon could go down a similar path. And Sainz is, yes, that's all I can say about him. But yeah, Williams is just constant disappointment. It's like watching Brighton. You just expect so much, and it just never goes your way. I could sit here and say, "Oh, it'll be all right next couple of years," but I would be lying, and that's all I got to say about that.
This team needs a radical change in direction, and the drivers are easy scapegoats because they don't design the car. They don't decide, which direction to take in terms of development, whatever have you. But seeing as how we don't know how the teams are run, but we do know how the drivers are performing, that is something that we can adjudicate. And in that knowledge, you look at them, Carlos Sainz, he can put in the performances. He has gotten the podiums for Williams. So in that knowledge, we know what he can do. At the same time, he is a bit of a prima donna. He is hesitating on his contract to Williams. And if I were Williams, I would look at that with a bit of quizzicalness of like, okay, so you're saying you have no confidence in us, and we're paying you top dollar. What for? Are there drivers out there who can compare to his results for not as much coin? Possibly. But yeah, a bit of a mismatch between those two at the moment. Not what you want to see, knowing that when he's on it, Carlos can deliver. Alex Albon, he's dead fucking weight. Like, ever since they got rid of the North Americans, he's been exposed. With Franco Colapinto coming in greener than goose shit in the pepper tree, he had him on the ropes. pretty early on. It was only because Franco kept on finding the wall, which is why things weren't as dire for Alex. But ever since Carlos has come in, or especially after the first 6 months of Carlos being in there, Alex has treaded water. And those racecraft performance results that we saw in the early days of Williams, where he was lauded, it's not even that they're not prevalent, they're just not happening anymore. And instead, we've seen some clumsy accidents in the race as well, which leads you to ask, what value does he bring to the team other than a smidgen of marquee value, which I'm not even sure really elevates him above certain other drivers that could be waiting in the wings. Now, in their academy, in the Williams Driver Academy, you got Luke Browning, who's fantastic. He's stuck in purgatory in Super Formula. I don't know if he has the Super License points, but if he does, they got to at least consider him. The fact that they did not pull the trigger on Victor Martin is an affront, as Victor Martin showed his potential in Formula 2, despite Bruno Michel keeping on giving him food blenders for engines. Other people, like, I swear there's someone I'm missing here. Who else is in that academy right now? I'm missing him. Who is it?
Ollie Gray still in it, or did they got rid of him ages ago?
I think Ollie Gray's been consigned to the pages of history, I think.
He started sucking. Didn't he do LMP2, or he did some GT thing for a bit and then just disappeared?
He did something.
Jamie Chadwick has basically become an ambassador now, and
that she has. Sorry, I am
there's
Googling
right now. There's that Ukrainian guy who's doing
Alexander Bondarev.
He's around.
He's still way off. He's in Formula Regional now.
Alessandro Giusti and Nakamura Berta.
Both in F3.
Nakamura Berta, but they're still ways off. Browning could be that, but I don't know if they'll give him the chance. But irrespective of whether they give Browning a shot or not, they need to cut bait with Albon. Not simply to make a move for the sake of making a move. I don't believe in that philosophy. You got to have someone that could be a marketable improvement. But right now, I don't see the value that Albon brings. And I think it's a general consensus that he's not really bringing anything to Williams lately. So, as cruel as it sounds, they need to get rid of him. And Carlos, as much as he wants to say that the blue flags weren't showing on a steering wheel, even through the limited vision that we have through onboard cameras, we could still see those big-ass blue flags boards flashing all around the damn circuit like a Christmas tree. So that's not really an excuse for him. That's my 2 cents on that.
And your race engineer normally tells you when front runners are approaching as well.
Front markers.
Yeah, 100%. And generally, you can hear as well when cars are around you. You got better sensors when you're inside the car, and that extends from karting to junior formula, open wheel racing. So, yeah, Williams are a bit of a basket case. They need to get their ass into gear because right now they have been overtaken in the pecking order by a team which a couple races ago was performing worse than an HRT car that couldn't qualify in 2012.
So yeah, it's also funny with Williams because now they're scared because they've got upgrades coming in Baku, but apparently they're not anywhere near as big as Aston Martin's upgrades. Because yay, Aston Martin are good again. So yeah, Ace, what could we expect from them? Points? Anything better? Or is this it?
Good again is an overstatement. They're passable again. So, okay, what can I say about this team? The development of the 2026 car was a complete flop. I already said it. They pushed their boundaries far too much under Newey, and the hope is that this new chassis, this new B version of the car, is proof that the team is finally settled onto performing its job of making a competitive Formula 1 car. That's the hope. The other hope, and we can only wait for that, is that also Honda has finally settled and they can again be able to prepare a Formula 1 engine, not a Formula 2 engine. And one can only wait and see. One thing of good from the car that I noticed, and before I would have said, this car is 4 seconds off the pace. Of course it's not gonna wear the tires, it's not gonna degrade them. Of course it's gonna be able to do 28 laps on the soft tire. When they are back to being competitive like the others, they're no longer gonna be able to do that. But I was wrong. At least in Hungary, they were able to last the soft tire until halfway through the race, which is incredible. On the strategy, it's basically what Verstappen did, but Verstappen did it because he had no more alternative other than accepting a 5th place as a finish. Aston Martin did it because they've been doing that all year. So apparently it's actually a core strength of the car. We will see. As for that, we can only hope for the best. Given the powers at play, one would expect the team to be a top car at the very least, but they're not. And we can only wait and see if they will become, or if they're gonna be the next Toyota flop.
Well, I think they've had their chance and they've blown it. Honestly, Aston Martin, they're one of the, I wouldn't say the biggest car manufacturers in the world, but they are the most respected and they've been in the game for a while now. They really have just, I don't even know where to begin to describe the almighty. It's quite funny, really. Actually, I mean, you got your biggest problem, Stroll. He's still there. Why? Well, we all know why, but he needs to go, and that's half the problem. But I know they made a big jump forward at Hungary. That's not good enough for Aston Martin. That wouldn't be good enough for anyone. And all celebrate this. And where's this come from? A couple of years ago, they were up on the podium. We're all thinking, "Way, Aston Martin is where they should be, and they should be up that way because they have so much history and pedigree and everything. They should be up there, but they're not, and they fully deserve it. I think, yeah." That's what I just said. You fully deserve it, Aston Martin. I hate you. But in all seriousness, cannot see them getting any better. They might pick up a few points with Alonso. Stroll will be nowhere near. He'll be 5 laps down as usual. The sooner he gets out, the sooner Aston Martin can actually be taken seriously, in my eyes. Fernando will probably stay around for another year, and then maybe after that, they can actually start getting competitive and actually doing what people expect from them. Because up until now, in my eyes, might be different to you, but they've just not been a serious team. I'm sorry if that upsets any Aston Martin fans, but it's true. And seeing them down there near the bottom is the funniest thing I've seen, especially with Nui being there. Like, come on. I know it's all new regulations and it's all a learning curve, but everyone else has managed it relatively fine. And it's just nobody expected this. I never expected this to go so badly for them. And this is going to take them a couple of years to really recover from, I think.
Is there anything that I can add to this whole debacle? Just shit show. That's all it really is. Yeah. We could talk about Stroll. It's an easy thing to rag on. It's tip of the iceberg, though. When it comes to the multitude of problems that they've got, there's probably too many old heads in the whole management structure as well. Some who have worn out their welcome. Fernando, love the guy to death. I don't know how viable it is for a team that's looking to the future to have a dude who at max is going to be in there for one more season. So I wonder what their contingency plan is for beyond Fernando. Who are you looking for? Because if your answer is, oh, we'll get someone like Yuki Tsunoda to drive alongside Lance, it's like, all due respect to Yuki, you're just going backwards here. I don't quite know what they're going to be aiming for beyond this. They're starting to find their way a little bit, but it's not hard to improve on garbage. That's for damn sure. They got more upgrades coming. What effect they'll have, I don't even think Aston will really know until it's on the road. You would hope that they would do well. Elsewise, you got another team in traction, potentially the marquee as a whole in trouble. They're already losing money hand over fist, even with Stroll investing what he has into the brand. So I don't know. I don't think anybody forecast this, and the fact that it has happened with who's involved in that team and the expense that's gone into it is not only mind-boggling, it's flat out unacceptable. But yeah, here we are.
I think I agree with Josh in that Stroll, Lance that is the tip of the iceberg. He's not the best Formula One driver, but he's in a team that is going or that hasn't been doing much. He's completely fine. Like, the results for this season, I can easily just write off as they don't matter in terms of the gaps between the teammates, because we saw in Silverstone, Lance was literally turning the car fully 90 degrees. He was just completely gave up on that car. There is no way I'm taking any of the results for at least the first half of the season from before Hungary as anything other than just test sessions, glorified test sessions. Lance is not the problem. He has proven time, like even last year and the year before, he wasn't that far behind Fernando in pure pace. It's just that he wasn't the one scoring points, but that was mostly due to factors outside of his control. He had weekends where he was good. I mean, Vegas last year, there was a very small chance, and it was a very small chance that he could have been on pole. He would have definitely got to Q3 if they'd have made the right tyre choice. Lance, when he wants to be, is a superb driver. We saw that in 2020. He was better than Perez that year, and he was better than Vettel in 21. He was at least equal to him in 22, and I mean, even despite his wrist issues in 23, towards the end of the year, I think in the last 5 races, he scored more points than Alonso. And yes, that was by the time the car had fallen off. But Stroll is not the problem with that team, is what I'm trying to say. Adrian Newey has been known for his radical designs. The McLaren that never made it, the MP418. And even at Red Bull, like he joined Red Bull in, I think, 2006. They didn't start winning until 2009. Yet, yes, with Toro Rosso and the fact that they were the same car, 2008, you could argue. But it took him quite a while to get that car under wraps. And then, obviously Red Bull then had a couple of ups and downs. I think that he's just been very, very, because I think part of the problem with the Aston was that they packaged things too compactly, which is, I think, something that has plagued his worse designs in the past. So they will just build. They will just build. Newey, even at the age of pushing 70, is still a fantastic car designer. They will build, and I said this throughout the season now. I think by the end of the season, Aston will be scoring at least semi-consistent points. Even if it's not remarkable, they will be scoring semi-consistent points. And as I say, Stroll isn't, like, as much as there are better drivers than Stroll, he's not the problem. Alonso is still good, not great, just good. And I mean, I wouldn't even put a definite thing on him only being available around for one more year, because I think that if he genuinely believes that Aston might come around and have the best car in 2028, he's staying another year, and he will just not let go. So I think they need to bank on Newey essentially getting the car right, because if Newey gets the car right and somehow next year they are the best team, which they're not going to be, but if they want to be the best team, maybe Alonso could win the championship. But even then, I think that Alonso in the outright dominant car beats someone like Antonelli or Hamilton or Verstappen in a slightly worse car, it's a lot less certain than it would have been a couple of years ago. Because like Alonso in 2023 was excellent, but like we have like Alonso even in his worst years, like worst years in terms of car performance, like in his McLaren Honda years, at least once a year you'd have one race where he'd be like, where on earth has he come from and done that? Like I think there was one race in 2016 where he got fifth. I think it was Kota. 2017 he had a couple of drives. 2018 in the first half of the year he was getting fifth and seventh and sixth places out of nowhere. This season, and to be fair, since like 2024, there hasn't really been that. Yeah, there's been a couple of races where he's maybe got better results than the car deserved, but I'm not seeing the same things from Alonso that I was seeing even a few years ago. Stroll is perfectly permissible in that seat. Alonso is perfectly permissible in that seat. I have a feeling that they'll try, because Josh talked about Tsunoda. I think they will look for a marquee signing to replace Alonso. They did this before. They've done this. They had Vettel to replace Perez, and he was a marquee signing, and then it was Alonso to replace Vettel. I think they'll go for, even if it's not Verstappen, because I think he's off the table, they'll at least try and sign a big driver, maybe someone who's feeling disoriented or kind of mismanaged in the top team, whether it be Piastri, whether it be Leclerc or someone like that. They will find a marquee signing and go with them. Tsunoda is not that kind of guy. Yeah, there's not really much to talk about Aston. It's just kind of hopes and prayers, really.
I mean, I think these upgrades have done quite a lot already, and we'll see when they bring the power unit in, if that helps them at all at Monza and Baku. It's not going to help them as Zandvoort, but it might there. They could get points, and if they do, that's pretty much a death sentence for Cadillac, who they had their fun being faster than them, but they're slowest again. But all things considered, this could be so much worse as a debut campaign for a team. They can keep up with everyone. The car breaks down a lot. Bottas somehow is better than Checo in qualifying, but so much worse in the races. And there's already tension because they've kicked out Graham Loudon and brought in this Marcin Bukowski as their new team principal. Why? I don't know, but it sounds like it was kind of a quite abrupt decision that Loudon himself wasn't sure about. So I'm sure there's some interesting gossip there. But yeah, they're just this. Yeah, it's kind of going okay at the moment, I think.
Yeah.
I start.
Sorry.
Yeah, I should have cued someone.
I'll begin, and there is no more in there. Because I've been thinking about what to expect out of this team. And for quite a while, the last 2 months, I thought it was disappointing. They began the year 1 second, half a second from the midfield, and now they're half a second from the midfield. They haven't closed down the gap. They started the year with some issues with the suspension reliability and the brake cooling, and they still currently have brake cooling issues and suspension reliability of the cars not falling to pieces. From another point of view, thinking a bit more, maybe it's not disappointing. We're talking about a midfield that is made up of 2 small teams that have been there for a long while and are operating close to their maximum potential. There is 2 other teams, pretty big. They're decent. Williams and Alpine. They're around. They have a long history. They're well funded. They're currently trying to become bigger to make the next step. And then 2 teams who are heavily funded have made massive improvements and are expected to make a massive step once everything settles down. And clearly, compared to those 3, Cadillac doesn't equal any of them. It's a new team with no experience. Massive funding, yes, but they're still in the building phase of everything. Under this point of view, it's not disappointing. But under this point of view, Cadillac expects the team to be ready for when they introduce their engines in 2029. They will be fighting for wins in what world, with the team right now as it is, its current trajectory, they're gonna be best of the rest in 2029 once Cadillac joins? That should be the expectations. So, yeah, maybe it's not disappointing, but they will fall short of the expectations of Cadillac.
I mean, for me, as a bit of a not really a Cadillac fan, but I do wish them well in a lot of regards. I mean, they are responsible for constructing the single greatest car in the world right now. So, yeah, for me, they get a lot of free passes, except for the brakes. The brakes is a little bit of a weird one. Why can't they figure that out properly? It's only two bits of metal that clamp onto the disc like that, you know. And it's been a bit. I would have expected them to maybe be near the points by now, but they're not. But again, I have to keep telling myself, I had a new team. If they're doing this next year, fair enough. You've done bad. So I haven't really got a lot to say about Cadillac this year. But can I see them like really getting better in the next 5 years? No, I cannot see them surviving for more than 5 years. I feel like they're gonna turn up. It just feels like a team that's just not set up to really be around for long. I don't know why I get this impression, but I just feel like they are just gonna poof and disappear in about 5 years' time, which is a shame. But again, it won't. They're kind of just there, and you hardly notice them. Of course, being at the back doesn't help, but there's no real route forward, and it's a shame because I sort of wish Cadillac well coming off the back of their hypercar program, and I think, oh, what are they going to do in Formula One? But that interest is really just plopped onto the ground. And even if they started scoring points and getting podiums, which is just not going to happen, is it? My interest just won't come back. Bottas and Perez are purely there just to get the car back home in one piece, which hasn't happened. Not really down to them completely. Can I see Herta going into the seat? No, I think that's gone a bit wrong, which is a shame because I like Herta. So far, not great, but again, they get a lot of free passes. I'll wait and see what they do next year. Maybe have a bit of colour to your livery. I was expecting something better than what it is, rather than just white and a few lines. Boring. But yeah, sort your breaks out, and then we'll talk again next year.
Not a lot more I can add to that. The only thing I'll talk about really for this segment is Colton Herta. A lot of people have been talking about his F2 results. I don't care about his F2 results. Like, he's going up against dudes who have been on the road to F1 forever. And that's just talking about the general scope of things. He's coming in, there's a whole bunch of circuits he's never been to, with teams he's never integrated with, up against people who have been here, quite a lot of multiple year drivers on tires notoriously difficult to get a handle on cars which every single freaking living organism in the world abhors. So there's that. Also, yeah, spec series, bullshit. I only compare against teammates because the teams differ quite a lot. So how he's doing up against Rotomo Miyata, who's a very reputable driver, has honestly been a fair amount of results. So his F2 results, don't care. He's only there to learn. What concerns me was how he was driving in the FP1 sessions. Now, it's not a matter of, him being slower necessarily or whatever. It's how he looked in that car. He did not look at all comfortable. It looked weird to see him out on track. And it gave off the impression of a dude who is not in the slightest bit comfortable with these cars. Now, if you put him into the pressure cooker next year of F1, you're going to have that week in and week out. And if that caddy goes backwards, you're going to be in the position where this dude is going to struggle to qualify for races. So I think before this year is out, they need to pull the plug on the aspirations to bring him up next year, because I don't see it going well at all. And that's not necessarily a jab against Colton, because I love Colton to death, but this is more him. This is more saving his skin, take him back to IndyCar where he's a god. And as for what they do with Cadillac next year, well, there'll be some free agents, but if they want an American driver, Uga Chuku's great. Just got to chop his feet off and then he'll fit. A few years down the track, Sebastian Weldon's looking great, but I see this Colton Herta experiment going sideways real fast. And I hope for Cadillac's sake, and especially for Colton's sake, that the plug on this gets pulled before eventually we see yet another victim of the whole Americans in F1 deal, which hasn't worked since the Italians win. Nedzo.
I've got to say, I disagree. I disagree entirely. Because, if we're being honest, you rightly pointed out that his F2 results are nothing to go by. Of the circuits that F2 raced on this year, or are going to race on, have raced on this year, the only one that he had driven before this season, obviously we can talk about testing and stuff, but before this season, was in 2016 in Euro Formula Open. He drove around the Catalonia. Funnily enough, that was one race weekend where he actually looked somewhat good. I think.
Wait a minute, hang on a second. You say that. Didn't he do Silverstone in British F4?
Pardon?
Didn't he race Silverstone in British F4?
I'm not. From what I did a bit of research. It was months ago, so I might be remembering wrong. But
and you see, that's actually the thing that sort of confuses me as well, because he did briefly race in the European circuit, and when he did that in the second half of the season, he was at worst on equal with his teammate, and at best he was faster than him. You know who his teammate was that year in British F4? Lando Norris. So that's why I held out hope. And with F2 results, I was willing to let stuff slide on the basis that Formula 2 is as big of a joke as I am, and the fact that when you compare against Ritomo Miyato, who we all know can drive well, it was respectable results, even given the circumstances. But I just had a horrible sinking feeling when I saw him driving in the FP1 sessions, and I thought, oh my God, this isn't even just a pace issue. He doesn't look comfortable at all. This is like me when I have to put the camera on for these things. It's like, people are going to see my face. So, go on.
I will say that if this move had happened 20 years ago or 15 years ago, they would have at least had the opportunity of giving him extensive testing miles where he could come up to standard. They don't have that anymore, obviously. But I still think that he would at least be. I know he would be a bit of a Hail Mary, but I still think he can't be much worse than Bottas. Bottas in race trim is apocalyptically bad. And one of you said that he might struggle to qualify for races. It wouldn't be that bad. That would be like 5 seconds off of.
Well, that's if Cadillac make a dog of a car, which can happen. But
they would need to be at Spa. They would need to be 7 seconds a lap off of the. That's not happening. That's not happening.
Oh, you want to challenge them on that?
Yeah, I'm pretty confident.
There was a risk of it with Aston Martin this year. If Kimi had trolled them and done a pole lap in Q1, that probably would have knocked them out. Like,
I'm still not certain. I think that, like, for example, the 2012 HRT, the only reason they didn't qualify in Australia was because their DRS wasn't working. Like, if HRT in 2012 with DRS only just failed to qualify, I think Cadillac. Anyway, regardless, I mean, the problem with the main problem I think with Herta is he's not the pick of the bunch from IndyCar. If I'm not suggesting that Cadillac should have gone with him, but if anyone wanted to try and bring any IndyCar driver over to F1, Alex Palou, like
Alex Palou, yeah.
he is literally like, and I've said this: the best IndyCar drivers throughout history have been maybe upper midfield / lower top drivers in F1 quality. Juan Pablo Montoya, Alex Zanardi, those kind of guys have at least shown that they could be in Formula One. Like Michael Andretti, even he showed pace. He was just very, very unlucky in his teammate, and he got a podium in Monza in his last ever F1 race. He got a podium. So there's clearly potential there. I think that Herta could become some. I genuinely think that he'll have an easier time adapting to F1 than he has been adapting to F2, because F2 is a facade in its own right. Like the same issues that plague Formula One, car performance what I was going to say was car performance taking away from a driver's season. You could be in F2 in a so-called spec series, and your team is bad for the entire season. That ruins your chance at a championship. Prema 2024. You can be a driver in a car that has good engines or is set up well and get results you don't really deserve. And that's been quite common over the past couple of years. You can have Mechachrome engines that range in horsepower drastically, and you can either underperform or overperform, and it's completely none of your fault. So I think that Herta will be better off I think that if you were to put him in an F1 seat next year, he'd do better. He'd have a better time adapting than he would be adapting to Formula 2 from IndyCar. I think that, as I say, I don't think he wouldn't be worse than Bottas. There's no way he can be worse than Bottas in race trim. And yeah, I mean, the only thing that potentially scares me is if he isn't literally a god in Formula 1. F1 elitists will go and say, well, this proves that IndyCar is a level below Formula 1. It's like, no, it's not. The top guys are F1 material. Even if the bottom guys aren't, the top guys are. And yeah.
That discourse is just asinine to me. It's like,
yeah.
I totally get that people would look at Marcus Ericsson winning the Indy 500 as validity, that the IndyCar grid is no good. But in general, Marcus Ericsson isn't really that much of a front runner. Not really.
Exactly. And he's in Andretti machinery.
And he's in Andretti machinery. But the thing as well is this. People want to point toward the failures. Did people not friggin' remember Jacques Villeneuve coming in, winning the World Championship in his second year, and running Damon close in his first ever year, getting pole position in his first ever race? Juan Pablo Montoya coming in and immediately putting Michael Schumacher in his place at Interlagos and really rattling Schumi as well. Like, there are a lot of indicators to prove that IndyCar drivers can hang.
Yes.
And the moments where they don't generally is because of being in the right team at the right time. Can Alex Palou be great in Formula One? Absolutely. Not in a Cadillac, though. And I would rather that he not tarnish himself by doing that. I would rather he stays in IndyCar, which is on right now, by the way, and
yes, I'm watching it right
and continue establishing himself as the greatest driver of the modern IndyCar, championship. In my opinion, he's already surpassed Scott Dixon, and he's just going to get better, do more. I would rather he establish that legacy than chase an impossible dream in a championship which is entirely based on fortune, luck, and being in the right place at the right time.
Yeah. Mario Andretti and Dan Gurney are also other guys who came from USAC and came to F1. So it's not an alien.
100%, yeah.
It's not an alien perspective. Yeah, I would say Herta's not the best option, but he's also not the worst. I think he's probably, in terms of guys who actually have a chance, because again, Dixon and Newgarden and a couple of other guys are probably better than Herta as drivers in IndyCar, but they're also past the age where you can get to Formula One.
Yeah, I was about to say, Dixon's not even over the hill right now. He's over the freaking cliff.
Yeah.
So
I mean,
I wouldn't want that boy to be trying out F1 right now. It's just like, ooh, that would be grim. But still, what I don't want more than anything is for Colton to have everything tarnished. Because, dude, it took 2 races for Liam Lawson to all of a sudden be the most useless driver in the world.
Yeah.
And people will be just as harsh to Colton in a lesser team with even worse predicaments.
well,
Because that's how people are on the internet nowadays. They don't want to give chances. They don't want to see the whole bigger picture. They just want, and especially with F1 YouTubers nowadays, all they care about is the meme value of any particular predicament. Because that's what matters. Not the truth, just the meme quality. I'm going to shut up now.
and that's why you should watch my YouTube channel, because I don't do that.
We're
Anyway,
all proud of you, mate.
anyway. What was I even on? Herta. But yeah, I think that Herta would be respectable in Formula One. I don't, especially first year. He's not setting the world on fire, but I think that he would be respectable. I think that was also why you just don't listen to people who don't know what we're talking about when it comes to F1 elitists who go who think that IndyCar is some sort of second-rate series when it simply isn't. Like Ericsson, Grosjean, and Schumacher have all gone there and done the square root of nothing, apart from one Indy 500 win, which was like the drive of a lifetime. Like, again, if we're going to argue that one drive cements your legacy, Maldonado is the greatest driver in F1 history. So yeah.
Okay, that's the team's done. Let's do tops and flops of the season so far and wrap this up, I think. Well, tops, Kimi. And saying that, I realise it's been literally a few hours since we mentioned him. This has gone on for quite a while in the end. Kimi's been good. Lindblad's been good. And Gasly, I guess.
For me, tops are Antonelli, Norris, and Racing Bulls.
Me, of course, would be my tops would be Kimi, of course. I think Max has done well considering, and Arvid as well.
Kimi, Racing Bulls as a unit. Maybe you want to throw Max in there. Yeah. I'm hesitant to put either of the Ferrari drivers, particularly Charles, but Lewis more. Just too many mistakes this year for me to be able to put him there. So yeah.
I'm not going to put any teams in mind. I'm just going to say Antonelli, Verstappen, Norris. Like, as much as Racing Bulls have done good, this could easily, I just don't really like grading an entire team as comparing them to drivers. So yeah, Antonelli, Verstappen, Norris, the 3 best drivers this season.
Flops the season. George, Albon, and Domenicali.
My flops are Aston Martin, Williams, Russell.
My flops would be definitely Aston Martin. I'm hesitant to say Russell because things could and probably will change, but we'll see. But I'm going to stick him in there anyway because this is a mid-season review. And I'll stick Williams in there as well.
I'm losing brain power, so I'll just say what everyone else mentioned.
I'll go for Albon. I'll go for Bottas, and then I'll go for what should I go for the third one? I think I'll say Haas's development program because I want Behrman to get a podium.
Cool. So yeah, not long now before the season gets going again. We've had too many long interludes this year, I think. But I mean, we've got some really good circuits and races coming up. I'm very much looking forward to Bar Asia being on the calendar, and yeah, I think it'll be fun, and we'll just have to see how everything unfolds. You've been listening to the DRS Train Podcast. We're on YouTube and Spotify. You can find us on Instagram and X at the DRS Train Podcast. If you become a channel member, you get access to bonus footage and behind-the-scenes content, and that includes all of our current members: Ariel, Quinnell, Silverstein, Burke, Shoshgoon, Elizabeth Hearn, Chris Adea, and Blue Guy. Make sure to tune in for our next episode. Stay safe, and we'll see you all next time.
Bye.
Right.